beer sound.
Hello, Internet. My name is Sean Michael Patrick Vash the Stampede Thompson. As always, you're a host of Drink to the Past, the only podcast where the host makes a dumber, ubiquitous, opening monologue every time and then asks you to share and subscribe our content. I mean, subscribe and share our content. Shit. I already screwed up, so that means I have to drink. And if you're drinking along at home, that
Good
means
job.
that you have to drink. So. I have a very interesting Sean Drinks Something Stupid today. First, I guess I'll introduce my guests. Of course, we've got my good old co-host, Mr. Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris.
Noida Audette.
Yeah, hi, I'm Chris. Please go vote Audette. And I will be playing video games for this evening.
Yeah, so if you're checking out our YouTube version, you can check out exclusive Noida gameplay by Chris. It's epic or something. And if you're checking us out on the audio versions, then consider checking us out on YouTube, because I think it's always kind of fun to have the video up of the gameplay, and we'll kind of make commentary here and there. So you're missing out a little bit if you're on the audio version, but we love you too, so check us out on Podbean or Apple if you would rather. And we actually have two guests this week. We have Mr. David Wayne Nystrom.
Hello.
Yeah. And returning our good buddy Taylor Wells.
Always good to be here.
Yeah. So we got a kind of a loaded podcast here. So actually, before we get into it, I told Dave we'd plug his book. So Dave, why don't you tell us about your book?
Okay. Yeah. I am the author of a long-form Zelda fan novel called The Era Without a Hero. It takes place between Ocarina of Time and The Wind Waker. If you look at that rather infamous Legend of Zelda timeline, there's a chunk on there that's labeled The Era with No Hero or The Era Without a Hero. And 10-ish years ago when that came out, one of my buddies asked me, hey, if you could make a Zelda game, where would you put it on the timeline? And I'm like, well, this looks weird. I don't like it. And surely somebody had to stand up and fight for their right to party. So, or that's paraphrasing, but
Fairly see, I've already seen entries for that on TV tropes. So
yeah. But so yeah, and 10 years, it went through a couple different forms. It was partially when it started out, I was writing it as a video game, and then I realized that I loved the story too much, and I wasn't good at programming or had no interest in programming, so therefore making a game just seemed frivolous, so why not just turn it into a story? And a couple of drafts later, I now have an actual novel form. It's being published in chunks over on Zelda Dungeon. Chapter actually just came out this Friday, and it is almost the end of the first book of a trilogy of books. So as far as where you can get your hands on it, I'm still working some of the kinks out with that. Got to make sure that I don't piss off the Nintendo people and get shut down completely. But then also I need to find ways to make sure that I get what I want, because ultimately I'd like to be able to put out the soundtrack that I made with it, include a map that I made with it, stuff like that. So that's my book. Check it out. Like I said, check it out on Zelda Dungeon.
I'll help you out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I've actually already seen entries for your book on TV tropes, so you got that going for you, which is nice.
Nice.
Yeah, so definitely check that out. So today on Sean Drinks Something Stupid, I have a new festive drink called the Crack-O-Lantern in my official spam mug. I actually sent in several UPC codes from different cans of spam. I think I had to collect like 20 codes from cans of spam or something to send them in to get this coffee mug. Back when sending in UPC codes to get free swag was a thing. So, yeah, if you didn't notice, I'm in a Vash the Stampede costume here. I used to have cool Vash the Stampede glasses, and I have lost them over the years. So that's kind of sad, but I figured, close enough. I also didn't feel like going to the store to buy hair dye, so You know what you gotta do. All right.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Krakow lantern, if you'd like to make one of these yourself, you can find the recipe is actually on Kraken Rum's official website, which I believe is krakenrum.com. But if you just look up the Krakow lantern, Krako lantern, then I'm pretty sure you'll probably be able to find it. So this is actually hilarious because I was looking at this recipe and I was like, hold on a minute, this is just pumpkin spice grog. And that's fucking hilarious. And so also there was a cinnamon stick in the picture on the website, but there was not one in the recipe. So I got a cinnamon stick and I'm not totally sure what to do with it. So I think I'm just going to try and use it as a straw like I did with the Chateau Romani.
Delicious.
Cinnamon sticks do not make good straws.
Yeah, I think
Does it
it's
taste
more of
good?
like it's more of like a dip and bite, I think.
I don't dip and bite cinnamon?
I dropped the cinnamon stick
Yeah.
into my Krakow lantern.
Okay.
That might be the way to do it.
That might be.
That too.
Actually, this is pretty good. If you like grog and pumpkin-y, spicy stuff, that's actually a pretty good pumpkin spice thing. The pumpkin, you only put in like a tablespoon of pumpkin pie filling, and it's and the rest of it is like spicy stuff and rum. So, actually, that's not bad. I'm gonna give that a. Let me sip it again.
Oh, oil doesn't put out fire.
That is a true statement, Chris. Every time Chris shoots oil at a fire, he has to drink. I'm gonna make that new rule. And if you're drinking along at home, you can get visual cues on our. I have a drink sign. It's hilarious. I think it's hilarious. Nobody else in the world has ever told me it's hilarious, so I assumed that they all love it because I keep doing it. That's how being a YouTube guy works, right?
Yeah. You get no response. That's good.
Yeah, so I'm gonna actually give this a 14. That's probably one of the best cocktails I've had on the podcast in a while. I like that pretty well because I like grog. So Dave, what you drinking?
I have a couple different brands of Oktoberfest here.
Good
Even
season
though
beverage.
Oktoberfest is well past, it's still October and
It
but-
counts.
it counts. Yep,
It's Oktoberfest in my book until Thanksgiving. So
I like that. I can live with that.
or
I feel
until
like-
they stop selling Marts and lagers at the liquor store.
There you go.
I feel like it's Oktoberfest no matter what month it is.
I'll drink to
Yeah.
that.
Sure. Yeah, why
It's
not?
always Oktoberfest somewhere.
Yeah,
Das true.
awesome. So what brewery is it?
One is the one I'm drinking right now is Spaten. It's an actual import Oktoberfest. It has nice blue-white checkers all over it.
Awesome.
And then the other one that I will be drinking when this one is gone is from Good City Brewing here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Nice. We love supporting them craft breweries. So if you're in the Wisconsin area, then go check them out. Or in the Milwaukee area. I'm not sure how big Wisconsin is.
Big enough.
Yeah. If that's close to you, then look them up. If it's not close to you, look them up anyway. And maybe special order their stuff or something. They might be wonderful. Chris, what are you drinking this week?
Same thing I was last week. I meant to bring on a left-hand peanut butter cup stout because
That was,
I had that
appropriate.
yesterday, and that was delicious. But instead, I'm drinking an Imperial Java Stout, which it's fine too.
Yeah.
I also like this beer.
I was thinking this pumpkin spice grog stuff would actually not be bad if I had put in hot coffee instead of hot water. I thought about that. Because then it'd basically be a pumpkin spice latte, but instead of cream, it would have fucking rum. It's like 8 times more badass. Dave, what do you rate that beer on a scale of 3 to 17?
Let's go a 13.
All right.
Not the greatest Oktoberfest I've had, but it's not bad by any measure. It's
Mm-hmm.
slightly above average.
Nice.
What's the greatest Oktoberfest beer you've ever had, though? That's
Whoa.
probably one that I had in Germany when I was probably about 18 or 19. And it was one brewed in the actual Hofbrauhaus,
Wow.
so in Munich. So that would be the best, I'd say.
Yeah, can't beat that. I mean, that gives like bonus points for atmosphere. Like,
Yeah.
Right from the source.
yeah,
Yep.
that's like going to the brewery in St. James Gate and getting a Guinness or something, you know?
Oh God. Yes, I want to do that so bad.
Or
I've
County
been to the
Cork and getting a
brewery.
straight up whiskey.
Right, yeah. I've been to the brewery at St. James Gate, but I was actually even underage at the time for Ireland's drinking age, so I got to the top of the brewery at the end of the tour and I had a Coca-Cola.
Underage in Ireland, that's a myth.
Yeah. Well, when you're
They
out
come
in
out of the
public, they
womb with a
technically
glass
have
of
to-
tequila and whiskey.
That's fair.
A glass of tequila.
Yeah, they drink all kinds, man. You've
We
never
don't
been to
judge.
Ireland, have you?
You're right. I never have.
They have every alcohol you could
Booze is
possibly
booze,
think
man.
of in their country.
And our good buddy Taylor, you're not drinking anything, so I have to drink some more this week.
Yeah.
So
If I were drinking, though, I would be drinking a Dos Equis Pale.
Mm-hmm. And so I guess I'll just have to slam this instead of, because I've got 2 beers here for when I inevitably run out of beer. So I'll just slam the rest of this and call that your drink. So I'm taking one for the team.
An enjoyable venture.
That gets more spicy the further down you get. I think the allspice I put in there got kind of stuck at the bottom, so it's all like right.
Could
there at
also
the
be
bottom.
the cinnamon you dropped in there.
That is possible. It's a little awkward sitting in this coat after so long because I've gotten a lot fatter than when I bought it. So I've actually only got 2 buttons buttoned.
Are you Robert Baratheoning it with the armor?
I don't know what that means.
Oh, is that
Breast-
a reference lost
breastplate-
on you? Oh, no.
Breastplate stretcher.
Yeah, you got it.
I don't get the reference. I have to drink.
There's a scene
You know
in
it's Game of Thrones.
where Robert Baratheon, who's like really famed for being this war king who won a lot of battles, he's about to enter into a joust and putting on his armor, and he's gotten too fat since he last wore it, and so he's like, "Somebody get me the breastplate stretcher."
Nice.
And then Ed Stark, who is played by the lovely Sean Bean, says, "I don't think that's gonna help."
Nice. Yeah, I for a little while I was the only person in the world who owned a copy of the first 2 seasons of Game of Thrones on VHS tape. But it has been a long time since I watched those, and I never got around to watching the 3rd season. So
They had that on VHS.
no,
Yeah,
they
that's what I was
didn't.
wondering.
I pirated it on VHS.
What?
Because Comcast did a thing where basically like all HBO shows were free on demand for like 3 days or something, and so I didn't actually have time to sit down and watch them. So I
he
got
brought out
some
the old tape
VHS
recorder?
tapes, and I would play it and push record, and then I'd go do something else, and I'd come back later, and I'd set up the
Gotta
next
put in the
episode,
next tape.
rewind
Yeah.
to the next part. Yeah, so I had the first 2 seasons of Game of Thrones all fit on 4 VHS tapes.
I did that with my brother. Entire the saga of Dragon Ball Z when it first came out on Toonami.
Nice.
We recorded the entire thing. We had like 15 or 30 VHS tapes. It was ridiculous.
Nice. Today's beer of the week for me, the first one is a hazy golden ale from Odd 13 Brewing Company. This is called Jetman Jimmy. I always love their kind of funny comic book style artwork on the cans here. That's always cool. And
If
this
you
is
get a
actually
whole
pretty
bunch of
good.
those cans together, do they tell a story? That's the question.
So like
Maybe.
one big picture.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. I'll start collecting and put them all together or something. Yeah.
Remember how old anime, like when you actually bought the anime VHSs, they also did that, like the box covers or whatever. If you lined them up
Yeah.
all in a row, they
I
would like
actually-
play out an artwork
I
scene.
actually saw, it was a couple of months ago, I actually saw several Dragon Ball Z tapes in the thrift store, the official ones, and I was like, I kind of want to buy these, but I don't have a VCR anymore. They would be literally worthless. But oh man, it's cool with the giant, with like the 40 tapes or whatever. It was missing a
Yeah.
few too. But
They need
like
to
it
bring
made this
that back.
giant mural with all the characters and everything. I was like, that is pretty cool. Like
That's
it
what
will
I'm saying. Because
almost
like
be worth it to just buy the tapes, throw away the tapes, and keep the the boxes, and just like make a collage out of it for that giant mural.
it's like 100% meant for collect. Like
Mhm.
you have the whole thing. It's a perfect like bookshelf item kind of thing, and you just set it up as a backdrop or something, and
Mhm.
it just makes it so much nicer.
Yeah. All right. Shall we get into the news and booze for the week?
News.
Don't all speak up at once. I guess we're going into the news and booze for the week.
Yes.
Oh
News.
yeah.
So the first
I'd
piece
be
of
good
news
for-
and
oh.
booze this week is Cyberpunk
Dun, dun, dun.
2077 is delayed 21 days. Will now release December 10th. And Chris has a note here. Would you like to talk about that, Chris?
Yeah, so apparently people have been sending the developers death threats, which over a game that's been delayed, 3 weeks?
Right,
It's
yeah.
complete... people...
Grow up.
Yeah, grow up, basically.
Yeah, I'm like, try being a Zelda fan for a game cycle, right?
Have you had a game that's been delayed 2 years? We didn't send death threats over that
Yeah, what
because
about,
we're not
I
terrible.
feel like 2 years is the average amount of delays for a Zelda game.
Absolutely.
Or not even like just Zelda, like games in general. Like you got Red Dead Redemption 2 is delayed heavily for
Mhm.
quite some time.
Yeah.
Then you've got Final Fantasy VII Remake had a
Oh my
delay, had like 2 delays or 3 delays,
Yeah.
and like
I mean, that's
people had the same
after-
reaction to that
I feel
too.
like they probably had even more than that, but there was like 2 public delays, I think. And other than that, like they just kept like giving us little snippets here and there of like, hey, we're still working on it. We didn't forget about you. So for Final Fantasy VII Remake, I bet they probably had a lot of internal delays as well.
You know what's funny? Final Fantasy VII Remake reminded me a lot of Breath of the Wild in terms of like its release and the information released about it. Like we had Breath of the Wild, announced, and it was that 30-40 second trailer maybe, and that was all we got for 2 years, and then all of a sudden we got like a little bit of artwork and things like that, and then nothing again for a year, and then all of a sudden they did the E3 where it was nothing but Breath of the Wild throughout the entire thing, and we almost got overloaded. Final Fantasy VII Remake did the same thing. Like it was announced with the trailer, we received a little bit of concept art and a bit of a gameplay demo a year later, and then nothing until the last, I think, 6 months before its release, and where we got trailers on trailers. We got a big
Yeah, I
gameplay
remember
demo,
they kept,
and then when
like, every couple of weeks they'd be like, here's the Tifa trailer, here's the Eris trailer or whatever.
well, and then when they did delay it the final time, when they said, okay, instead we're going to release it a month later, so instead we're going to release the entire first, the first part of the bombing mission free as a gameplay demo, and you could download that on PlayStation. Where they're like, yeah, this will tide you over. It's only 30 days. Good.
Right. This is actually a pretty good. I'm not usually all that into light beers, but as a hazy one, I kind of like that sometimes. This, what was this called? Jetman Jimmy. That's kind of interesting. Yeah.
Does it send you to the moon
as well? Maybe. This robot dude on here probably could take me to the moon, I bet.
Look, he's a Jetman.
Yeah, I guess. Next piece of news and booze. An Age of Calamity demo was leaked by the Korean Nintendo Twitter account, which then was confirmed literally the next day because they randomly had a Nintendo Direct Mini Partner Showcase again. They had said this would be the last one for the year, but what do you guys think about the Age of Calamity specifically? Let's talk about that piece of the Direct first. Did you guys play the demo? Are you guys interested? I mean, as Zelda fans, you guys are probably at least interested.
My wife had it downloading before I even told her it was out. Told her that it might be coming out the night before. She was playing, I think, Animal Crossing at the time, and then I texted her and said, "Hey, it's out," and she's like, "I know, I have it downloading for you."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Yeah, you're a good wife."
She's a keeper. We'll drink to your wife.
I'll drink to your wife.
My wife is eyeing me because I'm drinking to
someone else's wife.
So let's drink to my wife too.
All right, I'll drink to your wife.
I'll drink to your wife.
They're all drinking to you.
I'm awesome.
Everybody's wife is drinking. Oh wait.
Wait.
Apparently, everybody's wife is drinking. Anyways, so yeah, did you guys check out the demo then? Both of you, I assume, or all three of you. Chris, did you touch the demo?
I have not touched the demo. I haven't yet had the opportunity to.
Are you?
I
interested?
did.
I am interested.
Yeah.
I want to.
Tyler, did you?
I have actually not. Despite being a huge and enormous Dynasty Warriors fan, I don't know. Like it's a game I will definitely play at some point, but I am not like up in arms about. Oh my god, I can't wait till the day of release. A lot has to do with the fact that it's not canon in terms of story, at least from what I've heard.
It's not canonical.
I
It
feel like
may
it's canon.
or may not be.
It's a little ambiguous what it is right now, but I feel like it will.
Well,
at the very
the
least,
first
like
game-
Nintendo's literally working with them on it to make the story happen. So
but that doesn't matter because Nintendo kind of directly worked with Cadence of Hyrule too, and that's not canon either.
It wasn't billed as canon. This has been billed as canon, and it may or may not be canon.
Billed as canon by who?
Nintendo.
By fans?
I would say Nintendo. I'd say that they and literally marketing it as the story, the story you knew, or however they phrased it in that one like tweet about it, the story you knew, the story you get to play now, or whatever it was that they said.
That doesn't strike me as billing it as canon because they did something similar for the original Hyrule Warriors, and that one is absolutely not canon.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
I don't know.
A little up in the air, up to debate. We could talk about that all day, I'm sure. But
if it ends up being canon, great. But like from everything that I've heard, based on the fact that I played the original one, and I love the original one. Don't get me wrong, but you know, I don't have the kind of time that I used to have to be able to just drop into playing, a game that may or may not have an actual influence on what I'm caring about right now in Zelda, which is the story, especially after Breath of the Wild's somewhat uproarious arrival.
We'll get into that.
In the it's canon.
Here's a sneak peek of our video game topic. For today. What were you
If it
going to say,
doesn't
Chris?
end up being,
I'm in the it's definitely canon camp, if only because it's very clearly set before Breath of the Wild. And the previous Hyrule Warriors was not like that. It wasn't set in any particular Zelda.
I'll give you that,
when you play it, you will understand. I don't want to talk about the spoilers of it, but in the opening, what would you say, 5 minutes, you will understand why it may or may not be canon.
So I mean, like, I'm 100% going to play the game. It's just I was not in a rush to download a demo for a game that I will eventually play in full later.
Right.
I just wanted to get a jump start.
That you can take your save data and cross it over to the full game once.
That was really cool.
So I was like, all right.
What the fuck is that?
I don't know.
Okay, they've added some enemies since early access.
Awesome.
I think that is definitely that might actually be a first in gaming history, and where game data from a demo is carried over into the main game. I don't know if I've ever heard of a video game.
Others,
Octopath did that too.
Octopath
Right.
did that, and Dragon Quest XI did that. Although the demo came out for that like way after the game did.
Those are two recent releases, though, so
Yeah.
I would still
It's-
count this kind of like in the first of many, you know?
It's newer. Yeah.
It's certainly a new kind of approach to it, which I think is really cool because it's like
I think it's fabulous.
yeah, then you don't like lose anything from playing the demo and then have to like replay that part of the game or something like that. So
And I want to say usually, like, when game companies release a demo, very little changes in that demo to release. So it's not like if you did something in the demo and then played the full release game, a whole lot would be different to where you might have missed something out. So I
Right.
definitely think as a new trend, this is probably a really good one.
yeah, let's get into the rest of the Nintendo Direct stuff. So I'm just gonna kind of hit a couple of bullet points that I think were pretty much the highlights. Control and Hitman 3 are both coming to Switch in cloud versions. So you're actually going to be streaming these from the cloud. Control is actually available now. You can even get a demo of it before you play the game on through the cloud streaming, which is kind of interesting. I have it downloaded, but I haven't tried the demo. What do you guys think about the idea of cloud gaming on Switch? Do you think that's... Yeah, a lot of people, I feel like, are saying, oh, this is going to be how they'll keep competing with the next generation, even though the Switch hardware is technically not as powerful. They can cloud stream games and, you know, keep up. But then, on the other hand, people are also kind of saying, like, oh... except for that kind of kills the portability aspect because you have to have a really good Wi-Fi connection to play these games effectively. So where do you guys stand on the whole cloud streaming on Switch?
I think it's a good option, but for those who really want to get the full experience, I think they'll go elsewhere. But for people who are more or less Nintendo diehards, or people who just don't have the money necessarily to buy another next gen console, it's a good option for maybe dabbling in. I don't think it'll be the same necessarily experience because you're sitting there waiting, you're queued in, and you have to wait for your opportunity to play the game. But it's an option, and I think it's an okay option for Nintendo if they're not planning on coming out with a quote unquote next gen console in the next few years, which I definitely don't think they are. So
yeah, I think there's potential for a mid-gen upgrade, Switch Pro, something like that has been rumored forever. But yep. I think that's the only thing we can expect in the near future from Nintendo. And I don't know that would be able to still keep up with, the 4K 120 FPS that the other big consoles are pushing. So I feel like this is a good middle ground for developers for the time being. And depending on, what, if anything, the Switch Pro ends up being, I could easily see that.
Wait, has that been confirmed?
No, it's a rumor.
Okay.
Damn, I feel bad.
I have to mention my wife is yelling from off screen in the opening monologue, aren't I?
I feel bad here because I think this podcast I'm going to be taking a negative stance on a lot of different things. And
yeah, that's usually my job.
as far as the Nintendo Switch is
concerned, I'm just going to fire Chris and hire you.
Oh,
you
shit.
get no pay, but you get to drink a lot of beer that you have to buy.
I really gotta provide the doomer takes.
You dropped off beer at his house once.
I do drop off beer at Chris's house sometimes.
I'm a thirsty guy, so that I guess that works.
I would offer to mail you beer, I guess. Except mailing beer I don't think is legal.
I technically still owe you a birthday beer.
Yeah, give me my beer.
But not to interrupt. Sorry about that.
No, it's all good.
What were we talking about?
So the Switch for me is absolutely one of my favorite Nintendo consoles to date. I think they did so well with combining a lot of the original ideas they had for the Wii U into an actual palatable software palette and hardware palette. So like the Wii U's biggest suffering, I think, in my opinion, was its marketing. Like they didn't market it very well, and so it suffered greatly even though it was actually a legitimately good console. Like the
Yeah.
Wii U is also one of the greater consoles. I think it was way better than the Wii, and it's unfortunate that it suffered so hard. But when they announced the Switch, and then the Switch came out, and we got to play all of the fantastic games that have been released on it so far, I think they took everything that they wanted to do with the Wii U and they perfected it with the Switch, and it's been fantastic so far. Now, my only, Nintendo forever, since the GameCube, since after the GameCube, has always suffered in terms of the hardware specs aspect of console gaming, and where their systems have always been behind curve, so to speak. This was not true with the GameCube. The GameCube was actually hardware-wise the most advanced console on the market at the time. But ever since then, they kind of lagged behind. Now, Microsoft and Sony have both done streaming, like software streaming to their consoles, and those consoles currently outdo the Switch in terms of hardware performance, and they suffer when streaming those titles. So I think that while Dave is right, it's absolutely a good option. I think it's a waste of resources, and I think that it could be the resources and the money could be better spent towards developing other things. I don't think it's worth it.
Chris, do you have a stake in this argument?
I don't particularly have a stake in this argument. I mostly agree with what Taylor said.
And I don't disagree with what you're saying, Taylor. I'm just thinking it's I don't, like I said, unless Nintendo is willing to invest the money now into developing another new console so quickly after what looks like trajectory wise might be their best selling console ever, if it's not already. I think it's the smart option necessarily.
Yeah, I 100% see where you're coming from, and I agree with you. Like, again, I don't think it's a bad option. I think that because they're committed to doing it, so they're going to do it. It's not like me saying, it's a waste of resources, going to stop it. But and for what it's worth, it will be great as an option for those people. However, I also say that the Switch really only needs kind of what Microsoft and Sony do occasionally with their consoles, create a kind of halfway stop between the original release and the next generation. So, call it the Switch Pro or the Switch hand stop, whatever you want to call it. Like, they could absolutely do a technical upgrade to the Switch without causing a whole lot of problems, and I think that would have been a better investment of their money than doing this, because then at least the Switch 2.0 would potentially be hardware spec appropriate to the current generation consoles or the next generation of consoles, and then they can do more with it in the long term.
Definitely a lot to think about. Should we move
Switch
on to
U.
our next
Yes.
next piece
The
of
Switch
news
X.
from the Nintendo
go.
Direct? There was a trailer for Bravely Default 2, which addressed some of the things that they learned from feedback from the demo of that game, which came out, which everybody noted was hard as balls.
Nintendo Dark Souls.
Yeah, pretty much. It was like completely.
Although that's not really a
unforgiving.
thing since Dark Souls is on Switch.
Right.
That's what the Switch has games.
What? So, you guys any more excited for this after the trailer, or is this even on your radar?
Yes, in like 2 years when I have time to play it.
Right. I'm not sure where I stand on this one, because, like, I really, really loved Octopath Traveler, but from the demo, like, the gameplay feels like it's a step back from Octopath Traveler, but at the same time, what I'm hearing from people is it feels like a natural step forward from the original Bravely Default. But what that kind of says to me is that the original Bravely Default, because I didn't play that game, is that the original Bravely Default kind of stepped forward towards Octopath Traveler and also stepped forward towards this, but in different ways. So it's weird. I'm in a weird spot because I only played Octopath Traveler, and it feels like a step back from that.
The original Bravely Default had a point where they basically made you replay the game multiple times. So I'm hoping they would not continue with that.
It does sound annoying.
Yeah.
I think we also need to keep in mind, though, that, you know, just because a game shares a developer as other games, so like Bravely Default and Octopath are developed by the same people, it doesn't mean that those two games are meant to be the same.
That's
so,
true.
Sure.
As much
weird
as
because it shares so many similarities for me is kind of my beef, that it's like it's so similar, but what is different feels like a step back. So
and
it
that's
makes it
totally
difficult
fair
for me to kind of go in. Although if
Yeah.
it's not quite as balls difficult as it was in the trailer or in the original demo, then maybe I'd be more into it. I'm not sure.
that's totally fair. I think that's definitely something you should think about. But at the same time too, like, we have to keep in mind too with game developers, like there are quite a few game developers out there who just kind of like specialize in one type of game. You know, whether it be RPGs or action games, stuff like that. And a lot of their titles will tend to be similar to one another with minor differences and things like that. I mean, just look at FromSoft. Dark Souls, Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, and Bloodborne, and Sekiro, and likely Elden Ring coming out never.
Right.
You know, they all play very, very similarly to one another, but there are enough differences in them, you know, whether it's the story, the themes, or, you know, like a thing like Sekiro, where it takes the fundamental concepts of Dark Souls and Bloodborne and changes them up a little bit. So I think that, you know, as long as we're keeping that in mind, like, it's better to look at the games as they are. So instead of comparing Bravely Default to Octopath Traveler, I'd rather compare Bravely Default to the original and just see what the differences are, and not factor in the fact that Octopath exists and was the middle child.
Right.
It's like the awkward step sibling that you're not sure has the same mother.
That was literally Bloodborne, and then everybody was like, "This is the best freaking Dark Souls title ever." I was like, "Yes, perfect."
Right. Speaking of developers doing something different, HAL Laboratory announced and Shadow dropped their new game, Part-Time UFO.
Part-time UFO.
Part-Time UFO. Yeah, you play this UFO from space that takes odd jobs on Earth to make money. So you're literally like a UFO, and you fly around and pick stuff up, and you have to stack it or put it in the back of a truck or just move stuff. And it's this weird physics-based puzzle game. And
So does that mean you're only slightly unidentified, or you're only slightly a flying object, or you're only slightly an object? I'm really unsure about the partly here.
I think it's part time. Like you're only working as this mover part time, but
Yeah.
the rest of the time you're trying to take over the world.
So it's like Batman, but in a UFO. You're like a part-time vigilante or a part-time unidentified flying object.
yeah,
I
except
think that
for
works.
instead of beating up bad guys, you pick up people's shit and put it in the back of their truck because they're too dumb to do it themselves.
Or people. It showed stacking cheerleaders.
It did show
Wait.
stacking cheerleaders.
So are we calling this game a mashup between Destroy All Humans and
Katamari Damacy.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was thinking.
That's kind of what it seems like. Also, I want to point out that it's weird how many Japanese properties are based around strange things being part-time workers. Like, the devil is a part-timer.
It's a cultural thing. It's like it's applying normalcy to the weird and the not normal.
Well, it's
Like-
Think of it like a phasmophobia, where you're like a ghost hunter, where, like, you know, the completely supernatural, you have it's not normal in any way, but you're applying normalcy to it by saying, "Oh, it's a job that people have being ghost hunters," which is true.
But that's like the thing
Right, that's what I'm
people
saying.
mostly do for TV, yeah.
But again, you know, where do you think that comes from? Like, do you think that's because people think that, you know, the supernatural is normal, or do they think that we trying to figure it out and we're trying to apply some normalcy to it and establish it as being reality or non-reality?
I think if the supernatural were to exist, we would eventually categorize it and just treat it as natural.
This is the
Yep.
deepest conversation that has ever happened on this podcast, so I'm going to say you have to drink.
Although I don't think it would extend quite to the point of like literal Satan being a part-time worker.
But it's definitely a cultural thing that happens in Japan a lot. Like if you look at a lot of pop culture stuff in Japan, what is it a lot? It's anime, it's weird things, it's mishmashing whatever they can, mishmashing Western concept with old ancient Eastern ideas. It's just making things weird, but somehow making some sense, or just being so out there that it seems okay. It's like a phenomenon, not a phenomenon, so to speak, but more like a way of kind of like stepping out of the rigid shell that is constructed in Japan society, and where it allows them to kind of like express these wild ideas that normally would just be weird in conversations on the street between people.
So it's almost a form of, well, escapism.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, final thing from the Nintendo Direct was my most hype moment, because I'm a little bit of a No More Heroes fan. No More Heroes 3 got a trailer, and these two games are now available on Nintendo Switch. So if you don't have them on Wii, or are a lazy bastard like me and don't want to set them up on Wii, you can now play them on Switch instead. Bum, 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 bum.
Definitely one of the best game series to ever be made.
Yeah, this game, like, I played about an hour earlier today, and it is so fucking wacky, and I love it so much. I have forgotten how much I love this series, because Travis Strikes Again was like, it kind of scratched that itch, but it wasn't quite as over the top and hilarious as the original two.
It's the in-between stepchild.
Yeah, yeah. And Travis Strikes Again is still a pretty good game, so if you're interested in that, then check that out. It's not too expensive. I even have a physical copy because I'm a badass. But yeah, definitely a game series worth checking out. And they're on sale right now. They shadow dropped those on Nintendo Switch, and they are on sale currently for 10% off. So I think they're only like $17.99 or something. So that's not too bad. $17.99 each. So I am super excited to be diving back into these again, because, No More Heroes 3 got pushed back to next year, unfortunately. But, like we said, don't be a dick when it comes to delays. So, who's
some of the greatest
riding
games
the hype
ever
train
made.
with me?
Me, for sure.
Fuck yeah.
I'll hype you. I'm a bad gamer. I'd never even heard of the series until people were whining about it or crying about it for Smash, wanting Travis and Smash.
I've been saying
I'm a
I want
bad gamer.
Travis and Smash since fucking Brawl, and finally it caught attention in this generation, and people were thinking it was gonna happen. And then he was a Mii Fighter costume, and I'm so happy that he's in, but I'm still a little salty about it.
It's kind of like what they did with Sand.
Yeah. But yeah, so
And yet Steve is in Smash.
right.
Yeah, what the hell is up with that?
I guess
I
it's
don't-
because
I actually don't wanna
Minecraft
open
is,
that can of worms.
Popular, because as much as I love these games, it's a weird niche series.
Is it though? Because it's sold remarkably well.
I always feel like it's a niche series, because I very seldom find anybody to talk to that is like, yes, I have played those games, and I feel like a lot of people.
I feel like that's Final Fantasy fans calling Final Fantasy VIII a neat game, despite it selling better than Final Fantasy VII originally did.
Which is kind of crazy to me, because I'm like, I love Final Fantasy VIII, but I'm willing to admit it was definitely the worst of the PS1 generation.
Ooh, I'm gonna not
No,
me.
I mean, this is coming from someone who actively really liked Final Fantasy VIII.
Oh, I love Final Fantasy VII, and I love the Final Fantasy series in general. But I still to this day think 8 is among the best Final Fantasies ever to be released, and it's my personal favorite.
8 or 9, so I felt like 8 was. My brother played more 8 than I did, and I kind of got like the same sort of vibe he did early in the game, and it kind of turned me off because he was saying like late in the game there was literally still no purpose to not just like use the Guardian Force to roll over everything, and it kind of defeated the purpose of having all these cool characters in your party. And so I
Did
was
he
kind
play
of
the
turned
same game
off
I did?
from that.
Because the GFs in the game are actually some of the least powerful elements.
I don't know,
In
that's
Final
kind of what
Fantasy,
he
like
told me, and I kind of got that feeling from playing with it, like just the little bit I did, so I didn't play very long.
8 is one of those. I don't know if I would say it's rare actually, but 8 was one of those games where it confused some people because they realized that the stronger that they got, the enemies weren't getting any easier because the enemies scale with you. Final Fantasy 8. So the stronger you get, the harder the game actually is. So what a lot of speedrunners will do is you'll see them finish the game at like level 15 or 20 because it's actually easier to do it that way.
Interesting.
But no, in 8, like you had some very specific characters who were obscenely overpowered if you built them the right way. And the GFs, like the summoning of GFs, was actually not one of the stronger elements of the game in terms of like being able to just wash through everything. It was how you junction them to your party.
What I remember about the game was you could cast Aura, and then you just had to hit triangle until everybody got a limit break.
Yes. You could do that, but Aura is also one of the rarest spells to find in the game. Like, you can't even get Aura until the later 2/3 of the game.
Yeah, I guess that kind of trivialized the game for me.
Oh, yeah, there were definitely some really cheesy strats you could do in 8 to make things stupid easy.
Yeah.
But if you play normally, and like if you play like most people or the average person playing through a Final Fantasy game, I think 8 is pretty challenging.
Okay. It's something that I've always kind of meant to give a go again. I tried to get into Final Fantasy 9 again on an emulator, and it wasn't doing... It was just awkward because it was on an emulator, I felt like, and I didn't care for the controls on my phone. So now that those are all on Switch and stuff, I think actually some of them are even on Xbox Game Pass for PC. So I've been meaning to go back and check those out too, but it's one of those things that I never got around to yet.
If I were you, I would play it on Steam. Not the remake version, but the original. The remake is fine, but like it makes some things weird.
Okay.
But the original Steam release of it, all you have to do is kind of patch the audio because the music got screwed up somehow in the Steam version. But other than that, it's basically the exact same as the original PS1 one, and it's fabulous.
Yeah, might check that out then. All right, so that's all for the news and booze. Shall we get into our video game topic?
Oh, let's.
All right. So our first video game topic, because today we're just going to do 2 video game topics for fun, because I just want to talk about Breath of the Wild the whole fucking podcast, and it's going to be great. Fuck you. So we're going to be talking about why Breath of the Wild has the best story ever, and our 2 guests are totally wrong. I'm kidding, I love you guys, but you're wrong.
I'm going to enjoy this. This is a 2v2.
Is it? Are you on board with me having Breath of the Wild?
I don't think it's the... Okay, I'll say I don't think it's the best story ever. I feel like it's a good example of environmental storytelling and game design.
I don't disagree with that, but
that's fair.
I have comments, yeah.
And that's exactly why we brought these guys on, actually. We started on a little bit of a Twitter discussion, and we were like, hey, wait a minute, this could make a cool podcast. Let's get you guys on. So
we lit Twitter on fire for like an hour. It was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, so let's light this podcast on fire. So who wants to go first? Who's gonna fire the first shell?
I will. I'll go ahead and do this. I've done it on another podcast that I've been on before. So,
Mm-hmm.
Breath of the Wild had me so hyped with the E3 trailer, the one that was where it showed off the voice acting and all the characters, and it was this moment of, I remember I was at work and I watched it, and my coworkers around me were like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "No, I'm over the top." I was so excited. Because I was picturing it. This is going to be not only the greatest Zelda ever potentially, but it's going to show me everything I've always wanted out of a Zelda game. That I always thought Nintendo would never give me. It's going to be this full on, everything mattered, every moment would be impactful, all these characters would be super deep, and I would know everything about them, and I would care about them. I looked at it like, this is going to be what some people would say, the Final Fantasy VII of Zelda. Like, I was looking at it like, this is going to take everything that I love about Ocarina of Time and put it into a cinematic, story-driven, plot important moment. And then I played it, and I felt like, okay, where is all this? Where's all this stuff that I saw in this trailer? And granted, I was probably over expecting from it at that point, but when I played it, I was like, this is a lot of fun. But where is everything else? Where is everything that trailer built me up to believe was coming? Where was, I thought I was going to be, am I going into battle with Daruk? Am I going into battle with, these champions by my side? I never got it. And I saw what they were doing after I started playing it, and I felt, okay, this is fine. This is okay. It's not what I was hoping for. It's not I like the story, but I don't like how I have to get to it. I don't like I didn't like necessarily having to, not that I wanted it, told to me directly. I understood that they were doing open world, and that made sense, and it was fine. But I wanted something more. I wanted to be invested in these characters. If they died, that's fine. I'm okay with characters dying. In certain points, I like that. It's necessary. It brings the right emotion. But when I started playing it and I realized, oh, these characters are already dead. It's not like I'm fighting necessarily for them. I am, but I don't have the emotional connection. I don't have the emotional connection to the story. I don't have the emotional connection to this world. That was what was missing for me. And that's why the story was fine, but I couldn't connect with it. I couldn't feel like it couldn't make me care enough to the point where this matters to me. This town matters to me. These ruins matter to me. They didn't. And that bothered me, and that's why it could never be what I wanted it to be, so to speak. I don't, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, no. So I'm gonna tack on slightly to that, and just to give kind of a contextual example for what David's saying, in that they essentially relied upon you being an extreme fan of Zelda already in order to make the game and the story work. Because if you look at a lot of people who just played the game, who are not like typical Zelda fans, or they're just gamers in general, and this, you could see this a lot on Twitch with a lot of people who streamed the game when it first came out, is that they had a lot of people who were not Zelda fans originally, but were just playing the game to play the game because it was the biggest hit. A lot of them have the same opinions where they're like, why am I doing all this? None of this makes sense. And I don't understand.
What's my motivation?
Yeah, like,
Right.
what's my motivation? Why am I doing this? Yeah, a lot of these areas are cool. A lot of these mechanics work really well because, I mean, it's Nintendo. Nintendo polishes their games to no end and makes them all play pretty damn close to flawlessly. But there's more to games, I think, especially in the modern age, than just a game playing well in order to make it a good game. So that's just the minor bit of context I was going to add to Dave.
And I agree with that.
I kind of get that. I feel like, personally, I was never looking for a reason to play the game. I feel like that was always presented to me. I feel like, actually, every single thing that, Dave, you were kind of saying you were expecting from the game, with the, character importance and the plot importance, I feel like I got literally all of that out of this game. And more so than I do out of the average game. I don't think it's my favorite story out of any game, but I think it's one of the best stories, and it's told in a way that makes it more impactful by presenting itself through the gameplay, because it doesn't feel like, any other game where it's like, okay, you go, here to here to here, you see the cutscenes, or there's dialogue at this point and this point, and you're just kind of, at that point, it's very similar to just watching a movie, which is a good way of telling a story, but you're not experiencing that story. And I feel like very few games for me have really ever felt like I was experiencing a story, and Breath of the Wild is absolutely one of them, where it feels, every single moment in the entire game feels like it's a personal experience to me, especially with the non-linearity of it, because especially like right at the time when it came out, I was talking to, people, everybody was talking about this game when it came out, and their experiences with it, and everybody was talking about a different experience. They're like, oh, I had this thing happen in this shrine, or, oh, I was fighting a moblin, or, oh, I went to Hyrule Castle early, oh, I was in this completely different area that you've never even heard of. And no two stories were even similar, much less the same. And that's not something that any other game can say, I feel like. Even in open world games, that is very rare to have anything close to that level of difference and that level of personal connection with the game. And to the point of where it makes the story better, I feel like the way it presents itself just lends itself well to storytelling through gameplay, because when you want this story, you go out and you seek it, and you can find it in so many different ways that, to me, it comes out as much better than any other game, because any other game, you have one way to get the story, which is to go to where the story is and do whatever you have to do for the story. You do the one specific thing. Whereas Breath of the Wild, you're getting the story pieces in different locations through different means. You're getting it through just bits of lore here and there scattered about. You're getting it through the Champion's Diaries. You're getting it through memories. You're getting it through some of these cutscenes where you go to a specific point and you get specific cutscene, and that's fine. But they're all out of order. And it kind of... It lends itself, again, back to that personal experience where the way that you see the story will differ from everybody. And so you'll kind of get a different amount of understanding on this part of the story before this part, where another person might get them in a different order. And to me, that just heightens everything about the gameplay and everything about the story.
I'm going to provide a real simple counter to that. You pointed out that you think that, or in your experience, you've seen very little games that have the same effect that Breath of the Wild had, right?
Mm-hmm.
The storytelling, the way that you experience it, and how no two people really experience it the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I do agree that Breath of the Wild is an enormous game in terms of its scope and where you can go and what things will happen in different areas, that kind of 100%. And that is definitely much easier to do in a more open world game. However, having played games similar to Breath of the Wild in many ways, over the course of gaming history, I can say that pretty much almost nothing that Breath of the Wild does is original in any way. In regards to specifically, I'm going to talk about the story part and with you experiencing different things. A game series that has done basically what Breath of the Wild tried to do with its story has been doing it for almost a decade before Breath of the Wild tried it, is the Soulsborne series. And where the entirety of the Soulsborne series is, it's very little in-your-face story. It's all you're create a character, you're presented a world, and you're expected to make your way through it. If you look and if you put pieces together and you be a little detective, you can get overall a glimpse of a very, very deep and complex story. And it's one of those games where if you go on YouTube, you can find thousands of videos of different people.
Mostly body video.
I mean, Body's definitely one of them, but I would say there are many, many people, including him, who do these kinds of things. But they all trying to piece the lore together, and no single one of them has the same understanding of the story. They all arrive at different places, or they arrive in the general same place, but they get there differently through different pieces of lore, through different artifacts, all that kind of stuff. And Bloodborne, Dark Souls, Sekiro, they're all very linear games. They're not open world. Yes, you can go a lot of different places, at different times. But it's very linear. Like, you have to do certain things in order to progress through the story. You will fight all the same bosses if, at least all the required same bosses. You can find it, different ones. Not everybody will get every single item, not everybody will go to every single place, but you will go through generally the same gameplay.
Right.
But everybody arrives at different conclusions about what took place in their playthrough, what took place in their minds of what the story was.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, Breath of the Wild does the same thing, or tries to do the same thing. I just don't think that they did it nearly as well. And they could have.
Okay, so that's a little bit of a weird point because I haven't played very much. I've played a little bit of Dark Souls 3, and that's the only experience I have with any of these games. But I would, at the very least, put forth the idea that just because a game series did it first doesn't mean that Breath of the Wild did it worse particularly. Now, you say it did.
Well, I'm not saying that either.
Right.
I'm saying that yes, they did happen to do it first, but I also think that they happened to do it better.
Yeah, and that's
my overall point.
I feel like that's a fair, opinion to have. But another counter I would have to that is that I feel like the average Dark Souls player is not playing it for that. I feel like the average Dark Souls player that I have talked to over the years is playing it because they get a hard-on for saying, I played this game and it's harder than Zelda. Fuck you.
Sure, but I don't think the average Zelda player plays Zelda for the story either.
That's true. That's a good point.
So
I don't play
Zelda. I
Zelda
kind of want to
for the
shift things. I kind of want to shift things a little bit on you here. And what can you think of any particulars in why you would call Breath of the Wild a worse example of environmental storytelling than, let's say, the original Dark Souls, because that's the one I heard everyone talk about. Same thing with me with Sean is I only played the first Dark Souls a little bit. I didn't really play much else.
I played mostly Dark Souls 2, 3, and Bloodborne. And Bloodborne is my favorite in the series, so that's the one that I use for reference. But it all applies the same way because they all play very similar in those terms. So with Breath of the Wild and Bloodborne, Dark Souls, Soulsborne, whatever, in particular, I would say, so Breath of the Wild, a lot of its story comes from the books you find, the very, very, very short conversations you have with different characters, and I already said the books, the weapons and items that you find all usually have a short snippet of information in Breath of the Wild. That is all literally the exact same as the Soulsborne series.
Okay.
It's the same type of storytelling, same type of, this is how the story is told kind of thing. Breath of the Wild actually takes a little bit further in certain regards in terms of like having full on certain cutscenes are fairly long and fairly detailed in conversations, whereas in Soulsborne, if there is a cutscene, it's usually mostly visual storytelling, or if there is a conversation with a character, the conversation lasts usually 15 to 20 seconds, which is similar to most Breath of the Wild conversations, with the exception of the main story points like talking to Mifa or talking, doing the memories and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So those two are almost the exact same. Like if you side by side compared them, same type of storytelling.
I'm not disagreeing
Okay.
with you on that. But
So where I would say that Soulsborne does it better is that where Soulsborne has that kind of stuff, usually it's just better at telling that. So like from the visuals, so like when you first encounter a boss arena and you encounter the boss and you look around and there's story elements everywhere in that. And Breath of the Wild does the same thing. Again, I'm not saying that Breath of the Wild doesn't do these things, just that it doesn't do it as well. Like the items, usually you need a couple of items together in order to piece a full story of something. So usually when you're looking at an item set in Soulsborne, you got to look at all the items to get the full picture, as well as put the context together with where you found it and who you were talking to or who you fought last, kind of thing. Breath of the Wild does the same thing again, but on a much smaller scale. And I think that's to Breath of the Wild's detriment, because the story of Breath of the Wild overall is pretty bare bones to begin with. So when you rely on contextual storytelling, but don't put a whole lot of context in that contextual storytelling, it falls flatter than, say, Soulsborne, where they put a lot of context as long as you're willing to put in the work to find it.
So is what you're getting at more like how Souls, every item in Souls kind of has a little descriptor attached to it?
That's one of the ways, yes.
Okay.
The other way is through some loading, depending on which game you're playing, load screens, then also, actually exploring through an area, the boss battles you fight, the minor conversations you have with different characters and stuff like that. Like, you got to work hard to put the story together, and like, you can get the overall story of a Soulsborne game fairly easily, but like to get the complexities of the story, you got to work for it. And I feel Breath of the Wild, again, is the same way. It's just, I don't think it's done to the same thoroughness.
Yeah, I was going to say, because pretty much what you're describing, I feel like, is how I feel about Breath of the Wild. And again, it's hard to compare because I've barely touched the Soulsborne series. But now what I'm kind of wondering is, you say that it's great in Soulsborne, and you say that it's not as good in Breath of the Wild, but what makes it bad in Breath of the Wild, then?
Well, okay, so again, I think this is maybe a miscommunication we had on Twitter. I don't think Breath of the Wild is a bad game by any stretch of the imagination. I love Breath of the Wild. I love playing it. I think it has one of the most phenomenal gameplay of any Zelda game to date. However,
yes.
Right. However, my biggest issue with Breath of the Wild is some serious faults in how it goes about being a game. So from its story to story and sound or music are two of the biggest things. And I can compare both the Soulsborne series in both of those aspects as well to Breath of the Wild. I think Breath of the Wild basically tried to, because Nintendo has not tried to do, at least with the Zelda series, something of this scale to what they're trying to do really ever, especially with the Zelda series.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they looked at very certain, and they even admitted it in some interviews, that they looked to certain video game series for inspiration on how to do it. I don't think they ever mentioned Soulsborne, but I know that Witcher 3 was used as an example.
Yeah,
Skyrim.
Yeah, they were talking about Skyrim at least. Was
Right.
The one I remember.
Yeah.
And I think they do a very, very good job of emulating those games, of taking all those concepts and putting it together into one game and running with it. But this is something I've always said, and it's something I said in the Champions cast, it's something I've said in many of the articles I used to write for Zelda Dungeon, is that Breath of the Wild tries to emulate, and it's more like a beta. It's like they were testing the waters to see if they could do it and do it well. And and I loved it. I did. But if I were to, would I say it's the the greatest game ever? Hell no, because I've seen other games do the same thing and do it better. Do I think it's a fantastic step in the right direction for Zelda? 100%, 1000% agree. And I think that,
and I take it you're not really open to the greater than the sum of its parts argument.
I am if I could justify it, but I can't, because I don't think it's greater than the sum of its parts, because the parts are a little too disjointed and they don't do each part individually well enough to make it add up to the right sum,
That's funny, because I completely disagree there, because I think,
Yeah.
I think individually each part is, there was an argument, I think, right around the time it came out that, every mechanic it does has been done before by some game or another. Obviously, open world has been done before. Some people compared it to the Soulsborne. A lot of people compared the climbing mechanic to like the Assassin's Creed.
I bet it even has hit points.
So hold on. I do agree. I do agree that Breath of the Wild, again, like I said, is a great game, and I do think that it's if I were to look at each individual part and say, did they put effort? Did they, I'm not looking for it to be original as long as the final product meets or surpasses my expectations. And unfortunately, and again, this might be because Nintendo is usually hit or miss with their marketing strategy, and I feel like this was a big problem for Dave, and where the game he was marketed was not the game that he got.
Yeah.
So, I think that is partly to blame. I think some, just certain design choices I wish they had made a little differently. So, like the sound design, this is a big issue I have with the game. The sound of Breath of the Wild and the music of Breath of the Wild is one of the most phenomenal pieces that I've heard and felt in video games. Like, every piece of music in Breath of the Wild is spectacular. The sound design of all, the weapons, of, the environment, everything, all the aesthetics, incredible. But it's such a huge design flaw that they're like, we're going to make it so you hear this stuff so very sparingly that you have to actively seek it out in order to enjoy it.
Yes.
I thought that was to its benefit in the sound design, at least. I was not as much a fan of the music for that reason, but for the sound design, for all the little subtleties here and there with the,
the aesthetics and the theming.
Yeah, that kind of thing, and all the little sound effects that you wouldn't even think would have a sound effect. Like, who would bother to make a sound effect for a moblin picking its nose?
Yeah,
who would?
It's
bother,
great.
And they went to extraordinary extents. They actually had a team, I think, of 12 people that just went out and hung out with horses for 6 weeks, just recording horse noises.
It's how Red Dead did the same thing.
Yeah,
it's how Red Dead did the same thing. All their horses are the best horses you've ever seen in video gaming. It's because they did that. Yeah. Breath of the Wild is amazing.
Yeah, and so for that, I actually really, really appreciate the sound design, because it's you don't notice it all the time, but when you do, you're just now that's cool attention of detail. Yeah, that kind of thing. For the music, I think is done. It has a similar feel to that sometimes, but other times I feel like it's just not Zelda-y enough. I actually wrote an article for this on Two Guys Playing Zelda, where I kind of looked through the music for this game, compared to how Koji Kondo, the classic Zelda composer, who was pretty much the guy that made Zelda music until, even through Majora's Mask, and was a huge influence in Twilight Princess. He was pretty much, most of the Zelda music team, almost.
He's still working with it, by the way.
Yeah,
he hasn't stopped.
Yeah, but he's not.
Let's not talk about him like he's dead. Jesus.
Right, yeah.
Please no.
No.
Please no.
But he's not the main guy anymore, and I feel like his direction would have been maybe a little different, and the way that he went with direction in video game music, particularly for the Zelda games, always felt more iconic to me. He was a big influence in Twilight Princess, where, every theme was the same theme, but it was changed just a little bit to fit the area it was in and stuff like
It's
that.
very Hans
Sure.
Zimmer.
Yeah, this
Like
kind
if
of
you ever listen to Hans Zimmer's like music soundtracks and stuff like that, you know how he's incredible and often compared to John Williams. It's because he does the same thing. He creates a base theme that goes for the entire project, and then he tweaks it depending on what the scene is.
Yeah.
One thing I would compare Koji Kondo, like it'd be more for video games, is I think Koji Kondo is Nintendo's version of Nobuo Uematsu for Sony and Final Fantasy.
Which is funny because Nobuo Uematsu, I feel like they're very different. They compose in a totally different way.
100%, but like when you think of Zelda, you think of Koji Kondo in terms of music. When you think of Final Fantasy, you think of Nobuo Uematsu.
Yeah.
Like it's just that's the name that comes to mind. Or Star Wars, John Williams.
Yeah.
You know.
Nobody remembers that the prequels, you know, switched to what's his name? The
prequels prequels were done by John Williams too. Every single Star Wars movie has been composed by John Williams.
Yeah, hold on. What was it?
Are we including the Disney ones? Or?
Yes, including the sequels. And to the point now where John Williams has refused to do another Star Wars movie.
Probably for the best.
Yeah. There was some Star Wars something that had a different composer, and now I'm.
You're probably
the Mandalorian.
It was the guy.
You're
Rogue
thinking,
One.
It was
or
the,
Rebels, or
like
Clone
it was
Wars.
Earlier than that. Maybe it was Clone Wars or something. It was the guy that
Probably
did the
Clone Wars.
Simpsons theme. I'm trying to. His name is blanking me right now. So he's a good composer, but it just wasn't John Williams.
Well, so the example I was going to bring to mind is that, like, just the other night, almost sort of in preparation for this, and also because I needed new wallpapers for my desktop. But I was playing with Steam's wallpaper engine because you can do like animated wallpapers and stuff like that. So some of them come with sound. So I found a couple of Zelda ones, and one of them just has basically Breath of the Wild music set to it. So it's just like, cool, I'll listen to that for a little while I do some work. And it struck me once again, because again, like this is something that I thought when I first was playing the game, but it struck me again as like how good the music was. And I was like, but I don't, like, I would love to actually be hearing this a lot of the times. Like I can remember all the places where I started hearing the music and the different pieces that I was hearing. It was like, why was I not hearing this all the time? Because I would love just running through Breath of the Wild with no goal whatsoever. Just running around.
Am I going to have to be the guy who says that I actually really liked the way Breath of the Wild approached music as kind of like an
That's the whole point of this.
I'll be the middle ground in this. I think they did it fine. I don't think they did it great.
Right. That's kind of where I am, because I feel like they kind of like they did what they did for a reason, and it kind of worked. But I would have rather had some giant, great, bombastic theme for the field, and stuff like that.
There should have been. I feel like there should have been more moments where I felt like I was playing a Zelda game in terms of just listening to the sound, listening to the music. To me, I think of riding across Hyrule Field either in Ocarina of Time or Twilight Princess, or in Majora's Mask riding across Termina Field, and having that music there. I don't necessarily feel like Breath of the Wild needed the music all the time, because I feel like that would have felt weird. It would have felt forced in a world this big.
No, I'm not saying that either. I just
right.
More.
But there are ways that they could have maybe done it that would have been better. And now I'm going to bring up an example that isn't really an example of one that did it better, but did it differently. And that would be Death Stranding, where you would be walking and all of a sudden you would have music come in based on where you were. And it was, it didn't feel necessarily overbearing, but it didn't feel out of place. Like when you were climbing up this hill and you've been climbing up there for maybe a few minutes, and it was dead silent. You were just listening to Norman Reedus grunt as he's holding this pack on his back, and then all of a sudden, this soft indie music kicks in. And you're like, oh, okay, music. And it didn't feel bad. It didn't feel weird. It wasn't necessarily, I I don't think it was perfect. I don't think it was, the greatest example ever, but I think it was fine. And I think Breath of the Wild could have done something maybe a little bit more like that, and it would have felt more Zelda-y, or at least given us that feeling of, okay, this is still a Zelda game with that classic Zelda soundtrack, where, okay, I'm walking into Kakariko Village, but it's still in the distance, and there was some of that with like Tano Village and Kakariko Village did have their own themes, but
And
and Terrytown, but because the world was so big, there was so much silence or just natural sound.
Yeah, just kind of
Again,
ambient music was how most of the
or if you're
in-between
riding a
areas were.
horse, you got that, and
Yeah, but
it just
that was my big dig, is that I really hate the horse theme. It sounds literally like the composer was just like slapping the piano at random places.
What's funny about that
It's fucking
is
terrible.
What's funny about that is the Breath of the Wild soundtrack is music that we play for my son when he's going to sleep, and he last for a while now he's actually been having me skip those two songs on the
I appreciate. I would drink
just
to
like
your
Daddy.
kid.
He's just like Daddy.
Now is a bad time to bring up that.
Because
So
I
really
didn't
horse
even
theme.
realize it was
Wow.
a theme, right?
Right.
When I was
So you
just
kept
like,
hearing it?
hey, there's music here at this place. I think it's music, but it's like, it's kind of quiet. It's hard to hear over the sound of the horse, which they put so much attention to detail into, and now they're trying to distract you by plinking random notes. It's just shit. It's shit. Chris, if you like this, you're drunk. Which
I think
means
it
you are
illustrates
on the
my-
right
Totally sober.
podcast.
I would also like to point out that if I beat this boss, this will be the second time I have beat this game.
Oh, wow.
Rats.
You are low on health.
I'm very low on health. I'll probably die here.
Don't die.
I think what
Please.
illustrates my opinion of the music in Breath of the Wild being a flaw more than a benefit, despite its overall quality, is a lot of what David said, in that like you could hear music in certain places if you knew where to look, but overall, wherever you're going, most of the time it's just dead silent. Now, if this game were a medieval, ancient history playing through realism, it would work really, really well, because obviously that's very realistic. If you're in the middle of a field with nothing around you, all you're going to hear is nature. You're not going to hear a romping tune in the background to spur you on your adventures. But this is Zelda. This is arguably a medieval fantasy game, but it's a fantasy game. Like, I'm not playing it so I have to hear all the realism. I love the aesthetics of it, and I think that, when you enter into a forest for the first time, the fact that the music is subtle is great. So, like, you can focus on the environment, you can focus on the birds chirping in the distance, or that moblin scratching its butt in, the northwest corner. That's all fantastic, and it does help. But the dead silence, it's so noticeable. And I would rather, like, when you enter into when you leave the Great Plateau, or when you come out of the Resurrection Shrine, you hear that main theme, that and you go through. Like, it's like, that's what I want to hear when I'm just running through the field. I don't want to hear dead silence.
I actually, like I said, I appreciate like kind of the loneliness of it.
To an
Yeah,
extent,
that
I
is-
get
that is
but I
definitely
feel
what they
like
were
it
going
doesn't
for.
have to always be lonely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's not a Metroid game where the emphasis is on isolation. In that sense,
Even
it's
in Metroid
and there
games, though,
was
I feel like they do the isolated
but
music like better, because it's like it's ambient, but it's still like memorable.
sure.
Like,
And
there's
I'm not
barely
saying that-
any memorable music
I mean,
outside
there's
of
the-
towns in Breath of the Wild.
There's the shrine theme. There's the,
Yeah.
That's okay.
there's the
I
Hyrule
give it
Castle
bonus
theme,
points
which-
because it gets bagpipe. Yeah, like the Hyrule Castle theme is a great example, though.
yeah.
Why can't the rest of the fucking world have something like that, where it's like setting the mood of what's going on here? The Hyrule Castle theme is fucking epic.
And
Yes.
and if they really wanted to give you the idea that, hey, you're alone and we want you to feel like it, You didn't have to do that through music. You could literally just look towards Hyrule Castle anytime, see the freaking giant pig Ganon gaseous form just swirling around, and know this world has been fucked up. And there's not a whole lot of people around. You're not going to be encountering a whole lot. You don't have to take away the music.
Well, and there's evidence of how damaged the world is everywhere, and that is to the benefit of the story. Is it does show that this world has been destroyed. Just in my perspective, I don't care. I care because I know it's Hyrule. But if I weren't, already a
Zelda fan,
a Zelda fan, it wouldn't have hit me as hard. It would have been like, okay, this is just a generic post-apocalyptic world.
That's an interesting point, because I'm gonna reference this back to because I feel like as a gamer, like it is hard to put myself in a mindset, because obviously I've been a Zelda gamer literally almost as long as I can remember, and so it's hard to say, oh, if I didn't play Zelda then I'd be like this. But I feel like I'm gonna kind of compare it to Death Stranding again, where what was I saying? I lost my train of thought.
Comparing it to Death Stranding, we're about music, sound, and the loneliness of Breath of the Wild.
So the storytelling through world building, I feel is similar to both of these, and obviously Death Stranding is not a Zelda game, but it has similarities in the way that it tells the story through just kind of exploring the world. You're finding these random people interspersed throughout the world in their hidden bunkers. You're like exploring old broken towns in this post-apocalyptic world, and everything you find is interesting, and it's there for a reason, and it's a little bit up to you whether or not you want to investigate or consider that reason. I'll give you that, but I don't see why it's any worse than Death Stranding. And I think both of these games were fantastic at this, kind of just presenting you with a world and having all these subtle little things that you can look into, and you can extrapolate a story, or you can sometimes it's not necessarily like you're extrapolating the story that it totally is. In some cases, it's just whatever the developer might have thought was a cool idea to put there, or the developer might have had a story behind why they put it there, or something like that. But there's all these little bits and pieces throughout the whole world that just add a little nick to the story, and it makes it more interesting.
Thank you for bringing that up
through exploration.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I'm going to say something probably that's going to get me lynched by the Zelda community, but I felt that I got more from the story of Breath of the Wild just watching the trailers and teasers than I did actually playing the game.
All right,
and
I'm with you. I'll defend you.
And I'll say this too, bringing back the comparison to for me, Bloodborne, is that when I watched the trailer for Bloodborne, all I knew is that there were some furry beasts going around killing people, and that the main character was likely going to be the one, his job was to kill them. In Breath of the Wild, I knew almost everything from the start. Ganon fucked up the world. I'm probably playing as Link or a Zelda character. You even see Link in the trailer. He's got new duds, looking fly, shooting them ancient arrows at some guardians. We're going to fight some cyberpunk bullshit.
Right.
I'm all about this life. I get into the game and I play it, I'm like, that's all it is. When I play Bloodborne, man, if I play the game and I don't do anything extra to find anything out, I don't read anything, I don't do anything, and I just play it straight through, I have no idea what I just fucking played, because you don't get the explanation. You have to work for it. You play Breath of the Wild the same way. You start off, okay, Link died somehow, or he was resurrected, or he was knocked the hell out, and he's been sleeping for 100 years. Zelda tells him, get the fuck up. Ganon's screwing everybody over. You gotta, unite the four guardians and come save me. I'm like, Cool. Do all that. Get there. Save her. Thanks, Link. Appreciate you helping me out. Game over.
But there's so much more than that you discover
Yes.
through these subtleties is the thing.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's why
but,
I think that Breath of the Wild
but-
has one of the best stories ever, because of these
but
subtleties.
this is but that's the comparison I'm making, though. Do you understand? So if I play Bloodborne the same exact way that I play Breath of the Wild, at the end of Breath of the Wild's conclusion, I will know everything that I need to know about the story. If I play Bloodborne from the start to the end, and I don't, and I do the exact same thing, that's it, I will know generally kind of what's going on. Like, something is happening, something has infected the villagers, there's all these monsters and Cthulhu shit going on, but that's about it. I'm not going to know pretty much anything. But if I do all that extra stuff, both in Breath of the Wild and in Bloodborne,
He said doo-doo.
in Breath of the Wild, I feel like, yes, I get a little bit more context for how everything was destroyed. I get a little bit more context on how people are surviving through this time and how they're going to try and rebuild. I get a little bit more context behind the Guardians, or sorry, not the Guardians. The Guardians. I get a little bit more context behind, the champions, and I understand a little bit. But again, a lot of that is just given to you through the cutscenes that you experience. The biggest piece of information that I found in Breath of the Wild that had the biggest impact was Zelda's diary in Hyrule Castle in her bedchamber, where she talks about Link, and she talks about how it, tries to explain his silence as a PTSD thing, and how he struggles so hard with just being handed this massive duty. And that was great. That was fantastic. Yes, thank you. Please drink. I will keep saying it just to get you to drink.
Duty.
He's shouldered with this, and it's fantastic. It is probably my favorite thing about Breath of the Wild is, those little diary entries, as well as some books you can find around not Tarrytown, Kakariko, and the little pieces. I do enjoy that. Was again, if I do that same exact thing where I try and find out everything in Bloodborne, I will know so much more about everything. Will become much clearer and also much hazier. Like, there will be mystery to it and things like that, and stuff that you can piece together. You can guess maybe, this is how this happened, but you don't know 100% for sure. And I don't know. It just leaves I feel more fulfilled learning all that story and stuff in Bloodborne than I do learning all the story in Breath of the Wild. And it's weird because I love the lore of Zelda. I do play Zelda for both the gameplay and for the lore. I have since A Link to the Past and an Ocarina of Time. But in this one, I just felt like it had so much potential and it didn't quite meet my expectation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. Like, I mean, I look at it. So I think I mentioned this in the long Twitter discussion. I would love to see. What I think would have worked better is if Breath of the Wild had approached the storytelling perspective of Breath of the Wild more like Resident Evil, which Resident Evil is extremely linear.
That's a great example.
But it doesn't necessarily always feel that way because you're rewarded for your exploration. Go back to some of the original Zelda, where you were rewarded by exploring. The more you explored, the more stuff you could find, the more stuff you could be rewarded with, and that applied to some later Zelda games as well. They got away with that somewhat when they focused more linearly. An example is Skyward Sword, where that is so linear that exploration is almost worthless unless you're just trying to upgrade your shield or slingshot or beetle or whatever. And I think that's where that game really suffered, was that it focused too much on the story and not enough on the exploration.
I have
where
that problem with
in
Skyward Sword and a few others, but we don't need to get into
Sure.
it this time. We can save it
Sure.
for next time. I'll fight you on why I hate Skyward Sword. No.
Wait, what?
as I take a
I
drink from
don't-
my Skyward Sword beer glass.
I don't hate it, but it is my second least favorite Zelda game.
Oh, okay. I'm not saying that out of like I've been betrayed because I haven't really
I
played.
hate
Oh
Zelda
no,
2.
but you would absolutely
and-
be betrayed by my least favorite Zelda. The entire Zelda community is.
I almost brought that up a few minutes ago.
Is it Majora's Mask?
Nope.
Which is it?
It's my second favorite, and that would be the Wind Waker.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I totally disagree with that. I think you're morally wrong for believing for having that down there.
I'll accept that.
anyways, when I was going back to it, I was saying I don't think that Zelda necessarily needs to come at storytelling necessarily directly as Resident Evil, but the way that Resident Evil tells you the story is, as you're exploring, the more you explore, you progress. The exploration is story driven, and vice versa. Like you're taking on this linear path, sort of, and then you're looped back around to a main area. Like I'm thinking of Resident Evil 2.
Kind of like with a hub
specifically.
world,
Yeah,
like Ocarina of
you
Time
have
or the New
Resident Evil
God of-
Kind
7 too does the same thing.
Yeah, you have this main sort of area that you keep coming back to as you explore, but each time you come back to it, it's different. And this could be compared. This can draw
Metal Gear Solid
comparisons
2
to,
as well.
yeah, or Metroidvanias, where you come back to areas with new abilities, and therefore everything new is unlocked. But the way that when you come back, it's not just that you're coming back to this area. It's you're coming back to this area, and now you have a reason, story-wise, to be here too. Like it's like, okay, you're back here to now. Not only do you have this key, but you understand like why this is this way. You understand why. Okay, well that's where that dead body came from. I understand now. In Breath of the Wild, they could have. I don't know how they could have necessarily told the same story or a similar story, but like I feel like that's the formula, or not formula, but that's maybe the way that they could have come at it, or can come at it in the future with future games. Now, this is drawing a connection to Age of Calamity. I feel like with the context of Age of Calamity, Breath of the Wild is made better in terms of the story, so long as the story is canon or remains canon, all that stuff. If it is a that
And
the
as
game
long
that
as
stands
it's
to
good,
benefit.
like we don't
Oh,
know.
yeah,
it,
as long as
it
it's
might
good.
like totally blow.
Yeah, I will be so disappointed if it does.
I think
But
it'll be okay. At the
but
very least.
my
least the
opinions
gameplay will
on
be
Breath of the Wild will change if Age of Calamity is good and canon. That could
Okay.
potentially change it because it gives
You just
context.
said something that I gotta say I really disagree with. I think a game should always stand on its own.
And I
I
agree
agree.
with that. I totally agree with that. But personally, I'm saying my feelings on Breath of the Wild will soften with the context of Age of Calamity. My thing is that I believe that Age of Calamity should have been a part of the story, or at least what we expect the story of Age of Calamity to be, should have been more of the emphasis of the story of Breath of the Wild, because it gives context to this whole world. That's my biggest issue with Breath of the Wild, is all the context that I felt like was missing, because it felt like, again, to go back to one of the things I originally said, is I wanted to, would I be charging into battle with Daruk by my side, or or a Goron army, or a Zora army? Is what that initial E3 trailer, or not the initial E3 trailer, but the E3 trailer, big one, made me believe was coming, was that this was going to be Hyrule at war, and we would be experiencing that and living through it. And then in an open world fashion of some sort, however that would work.
Sorry, you gotta wait for Total War Hyrule.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But that was sort of my expectations, and then when I played it, like I said earlier, it didn't live up to that, and that could just be bad expectations on my part, or was that to go back to what the Wii U suffered from, bad marketing? Was that what that trailer really marketed, or did I misinterpret that completely? And that I don't know.
I think I'll like Breath of the Wild more when Breath of the Wild comes out.
I don't know,
That'll
for
give me
me,
all the context I need.
I felt like I had this hyped up so much in my mind that I was like, there is no way this is ever going to live up to my hype, and I feel like Breath of the Wild 100% lived up to my hype.
Yeah.
For me personally.
Yeah. And it's fair, because at the end of the day, like, we're all going to feel a certain way about things, because we're all different people, and it makes sense. It's just...
Is this the part where we end the discussion on this is just a matter of opinion?
I mean,
it happens on our podcast all the time.
Or we can continue deep diving into how bad their story is in Breath of the Wild.
You mean how amazing it is, because it's got all the things that you say that Bloodborne is great for.
Well, I can't wait for you to play Bloodborne and come back to...
That is one of the games that has been on my list for a long time, and I keep thinking about it. So I will... Maybe we'll have to revisit this. I'm going to play Bloodborne and kind of... We'll get you back on and compare and contrast.
I don't know that it'll necessarily change your opinion and make you feel the same way that I feel, but I think you will definitely have at the very least, I think you will either appreciate Breath of the Wild more, or you'll just appreciate the Soulsborne series more for what it started and what Breath of the Wild attempted to include.
Right. Yeah. So shall we get into our other video game topic?
Ooh.
Bum, bum, bum.
Yes.
Why is Wind Waker one of the best games in the Zelda series, right? No.
All right, this is where I leave. Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining.
If you guys would like to, I would totally change the video topic to that.
No.
Actually, I just kind of really wanted to talk about some more Breath of the Wild, because I've been playing it the last several weeks. So
have we. We restarted a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I've been kind of slowly working through another playthrough over the last several months, and I've really been kind of sitting down with it the last couple weeks since they announced Age of Calamity, basically. Because I'm like, I want to beat it again, I want to get all the memories again, I want to do the DLC again and stuff like that. So this topic is about a more general thing, and this can be good or bad things. What should every game learn from Breath of the Wild? Because I feel like in a lot of good ways, it kind of changed the perception I have on open world games.
All right, I got a big one.
Go ahead.
If you're gonna make your world super huge, fucking fill it with shit. Don't make it empty.
Shit in it.
Yeah,
there's 900 Koroks. Did you find them all?
That's why Breath of the Wild is like a positive example of that.
I 100%ed Breath of the Wild, and I will never do that again.
Yep.
I'll
get all the shrines.
I will clarify that. It's not empty, but it's also
not worth it.
It's not full, and it's not worth it either. Yeah, no, it's definitely not. Like, I think Breath of the Wild had a really amazing world. I think that it's incredibly beautiful and obviously aesthetically pleasing, from the sound effects, the sound design, the music, the environments. Fantastic. The problem is though, again, this is something that Dave said, is that I apart from it being aesthetically pleasing and me being a giant Zelda nerd, I have zero reason to explore it. And again, so you were talking about how you were playing another game in preparation for this, and for me, I was actually revisiting another game that I think Breath of the Wild borrowed some concepts from, which is Witcher 3. And I think that Witcher 3, it doesn't have the best like I am not a hardcore Witcher fan like a lot of people are and think that Witcher 3 is the god's gift to gamers.
Mhm.
I think it's a fantastic game, but it also has its flaws. But I think that Witcher 3 did a better job of having a big world, but with plenty of stuff to do. It's not perfect. Like some of the stuff that you end up finding, is not worth your time. Like the poop from spoilers if you get all 900 Korok seeds. But at least if I go 30 feet or 40 feet or a mile in the distance, I am guaranteed to find something or have something to do and have a reason to do it. If I do the same thing in Breath of the Wild, it's only because I decided I'm going to walk 80 feet in that direction and hopefully something happens.
First of all, I am the kind of gamer that likes walking 80 feet in random directions and seeing if something happens. I love exploration in games. So this is not as much an issue to me. And I feel like even Breath of the Wild, I feel like, does this well in the world design, that even if it's something stupid and little, there is something. Whether it's just like, oh, hey, there's a mushroom over here, some dumb shit like that. There's a kobold not kobold, I mean bokoblin. I'm getting my mythologies mixed up. There's treasure chest buried in the dirt over here. There's always something, and a lot of the times it's little and stupid, but I love the little and stupid shit that I find everywhere in that world.
You know what I will say though? I will totally concede for the big things in the world. Breath of the Wild does it amazingly, like the ruins of the Temple of Time. It's one of the greatest things that, yes, in a given playthrough, unless you're speed running, you will go through that temple. You will always, encounter it. But like, there are other things like the Temple of Time that you find in the world of Zelda. And when it's big and when it's something that, you've played 30 years of Zelda and you know exactly what they're referencing, you know exactly what you're looking at, it does those things incredibly well. But the fact that 85% of Breath of the Wild's world is not those things, is just you walking through a field and you encounter a bush, and instead of getting rupees out of the bush, you find nothing. Or you find a Korok. Right. Well, okay, or an Octorok.
See, there's so many things that this bush could be. The potential is infinite.
But so if I go through The Witcher 3 and I go through that same bush area because I wanted to just walk through it, instead of finding an Octorok that I find all the time, there's potential that I will find a water hag that is actually more akin to a boss enemy than it is just a regular enemy that you encounter. Or I encounter a person who wants to hire me as a Witcher to go find a monster and hunt it, or to locate his dead grandpa because he's an asshole. There's a lot of things that you just find that are more to it than I walked into a bush and found an Octorok and that was the adventure. It's like there's just more to it. And
Witcher 3 is another game that I need to get around to. I do own that one, and I have it downloaded on my PS4, and it's just sitting there, not being played.
I think the story aspects of Witcher 3 are where it really shines. Like, if you're familiar with the Witcher books, or if you're familiar with the previous two games, Witcher is an incredible experience. If you're just playing Witcher 3 because you heard it was a great game, you will probably end up liking it because it's a good RPG game.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of things that you encounter in the game, you'll kind of be a little lost on. You'll have to spend a lot of time in the bestiary, kind of just reading through all the pages and pages of information they have for you because they knew that was going to happen.
Yeah. I also tried to read the book, but I didn't get very far because it was like the intro of the book is like exactly the same as the intro.
Well, there's like 12 of the books.
Right, yeah. The first one. I tried to start at the first one, and it's literally identical for the first, like, at least the first chapter to the Netflix series. So I was just I know what's happening. How long is this going to go on?
So the Netflix series is based off of the first two short stories of Witcher, which is The Last Wish and something of the sword. I forget the title off the top of my head. It's based off of the first two short stories, which kind of like introduce the world of The Witcher. And it establishes Geralt as a character, what his general personality is and what he does, and it establishes who Yennefer is and very briefly who Ciri is and what their connections are to each other as characters. So and I will say the Netflix series, I am actually incredibly impressed with how well they adapted those two books into that series. I worry that it's going to be like Game of Thrones, where the first 4 or 5 seasons are perfect, exact to the books, and then the rest of them are ass. But so far I'm very impressed with it. And if you've watched the Netflix series, you will at least have a general understanding of some things in the game. Like you'll know who Geralt is. Yeah. You'll know who Geralt is, you'll know who Ciri is, and you'll know who young Ciri is. Right. You'll know who Yennefer is, and you'll be able to understand their character dynamics and why they're in various situations that they're in. As for like all the details and stuff, like who other characters are or why those characters act differently than they do in the show, you might be a little less informed on. But you'll enjoy it, I think.
I'm starting to have a sneaking suspicion that the things I appreciate about narratives in games are different than what Dave and Taylor appreciate about narrative in games.
Well, what do you appreciate about narratives in games?
I generally appreciate the piecemeal aspects of them a lot more.
So like getting little bits of information here and there as opposed to being spoon-fed it?
Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah. I like all aspects of it. Like as long as it has a good narrative, usually I will enjoy it.
And that's not to say I don't like games like, say, a lot of the Final Fantasies or more like more games with a more traditional like plot. But I very much love the games where everything is more haphazard.
Have you played Blasphemous yet, Chris?
I have not played Blasphemous yet. I did actually start playing
direction for the story, and I think based on what you just said, I think you'd like kind of exploring, and because a lot of the story isn't necessarily told. It's also kind of like the Dark Souls, where you get like little descriptions in all of your items and stuff like that.
I would
today's
love
second beer of the week from me is the Dayboard Lime from Dry Dock Brewing Company, which came as a Pirate's Pick. They always do that in their mix packs. They'll do like their 3 kind of go-to beers, and then just some weird thing that they happen to make recently. So this is actually pretty good. It's like a little salty, which is interesting in a beer, and just limey enough to be actually pretty good. So
I did.
Yeah. And Dave, you had a second beer of the week as well, I believe. So I'm gonna make you rate that second Oktoberfest. Are you drinking?
I'll give it 1 point less than the first one. So I think I gave the first one a 13. I'll give this one a 12. It's a little not as good, or it was a little not as good. It's empty now. I done drunk it all. But
I'll drink to that.
What were you saying before, Dave?
I was gonna say that my dream Zelda game would be a Final Fantasy-esque Zelda, where I have this massive story, and I'm not gonna lie, I would love to see a party style Zelda game. I think that would just be tremendous. But that's a whole nother thing that ties into potentially even like tabletop stuff, like what I would
I'll drink to that.
Oh god, a Final Fantasy-esque Zelda would just would bring me so much joy. But that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, I did write a tabletop based around the Arrow Without a Hero. I did make my own system and everything. I just never did anything with it.
So to bring that back kind of to our point that we were talking about, what should every game learn from Breath of the Wild? I think one of the things that games could stand to learn is Breath of the Wild's take on story presentation. Even if you don't like the way that the story maybe necessarily is, I feel like the presentation is still unique within games insofar as it is 100% non-linear.
And the example, and the thing I was going to say is that Breath of the Wild has the show, not tell thing going on, at least for 90% of it, I'd say.
I will definitely agree with that, with the caveat of make sure you pick your moment. Because obviously some games that works really well with, and then other games it doesn't work as well with. You know what I mean?
I wanted to contrast that with a game I was tried to bring up about 3 times, was Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, which I'm enjoying the game a lot, but the story is very much in the other direction, where it tells you a bunch of stuff happened, and then just kind of
that was
dumps
a little
you.
bit of what kind of turned me off about it, because I tried it a little bit in Game Pass, and oddly enough, I felt like Curse of the Moon was like better gameplay wise, because it didn't. I feel like it's just kind of trying too many things or something. I'm not sure exactly what turns me off about it. It's like you're equipping all these weapons, and people are talking at you all the time. There's lore dumps everywhere, and it's fine. But Curse of the Moon I really liked as the other Bloodstained game. There's actually Curse of the Moon 2 is out now as well. I haven't tried Curse of the Moon 2 yet though. But I feel like the kind of focus on each individual character in little kind of segments, and then the fact that you could, you weren't switching between 8,000 different kinds of styles of weapon. You're switching between your 4 characters. I think that worked better in gameplay, personally. But go ahead.
Yeah, it was it was very explicit about telling you the whole backstory of the game before you even started with it.
Yeah.
And then saying, oh, and these characters know each other in this way, and that this is this person's personality. So it's very ham-fisted, very much. Kind of threw me off pretty badly.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely something I think other games can take note of from Breath of the Wild, and this is a positive one. You guys like this?
Yeah.
Attention to detail and environment, like paying attention to your scenery, paying attention to how that scenery should sound, paying attention to how it should look. Like the art style of Breath of the Wild and the way they do their environments is nothing short of incredible. And I think they do a fantastic job of that. And there are some games that are good games out there that I think don't pay as much attention to that aspect of things and suffer a little bit for it. So I think if games in the future paid as much attention as Breath of the Wild does to environments and stuff like that, and aesthetics, we're in for some great games.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, as aesthetically and gameplay wise, I think Breath of the Wild is arguably the best when it comes to Zelda. I will never, I can't deny that. I mean, sure, climbing in the rain sucks, but it should suck. You're climbing in the rain, and weapons breaking. Okay, I can deal with that. That's fine. I just wish they would last a little bit longer, or maybe I could reforge them. But that's a live and learn kind of thing. But just again, my biggest gripe with it has always been the way that the story was presented and the story itself. It felt so meh.
I don't know. I feel like the presentation was honestly one of the best story presentations I've ever had. Again, because it's non-linear. It gives I feel like the amount of non-linearity that the story has gives a purpose to it being open world, because you give a game like Skyrim and it's open world, but the story is point A to point B to point C, so it might as well be linear. There's not there's stuff in between to see, and it's neat. And in other games, like Morrowind was also technically like that, but I feel like Morrowind did a better job putting more interesting things in between than Skyrim did, especially just because the scale of Morrowind was on another level entirely compared to Skyrim or even Breath of the Wild for that matter. Morrowind was huge in
I mean,
comparison.
Oblivion was also slightly bigger than Skyrim, if memory recalls.
Felt like Oblivion was smaller than Skyrim, but I could
Oblivion, it was easy.
I
It was
felt
like you
Oblivion
traveled
was-
faster.
That might be it. I'm not sure. Because Oblivion, I felt like, was one of the smallest open world games that I've ever played. And I felt like that because I would just be wandering, because that is what I do in open world games. I wander. I look for just something interesting to find. I'm not necessarily looking for, a specific thing. I'm just like, yeah, which is another thing that I love about exploring in Breath of the Wild, is finding all this little dumb shit, like I was talking about earlier. But in Oblivion, I found myself trying to just wander and have a good time in the world, and I found myself accidentally finding the story like every 10 or 20 minutes, and I'm like, how is this possible that I just keep accidentally running into the story? Because especially coming from Morrowind, because I came directly from Morrowind to Oblivion in order there. Morrowind is a game where you have to go out of your way to get to the story, and you can have story. That's something I think Morrowind does better than Breath of the Wild. Is it presents a lot of more direct purpose. It's maybe not better than Breath of the Wild, but it's certainly a different take, because it gives you a more direct purpose on why stuff is here and what you're doing here. The side quests are more meaningful because they're kind of, giving you, like, you're on this side quest so that you can go to these dungeon ruins to find this item, and there's a lot of lore there, and so I feel like in that way it's better than Breath of the Wild. I feel like its world is better than Breath of the Wild's world, but I feel like Breath of the Wild is in the end a better game because I like the gameplay better.
If we're comparing Elder Scrolls and Breath of the Wild, like, the simplest fact is in Elder Scrolls, doesn't matter which one you play, Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim, whatever. You go to a village, you have a side quest. The guy's like, the dragon just attacked the village. He's in that corner, and it's also might have some dragon priests in it, and there's a whole bunch of things in there, maybe a rare artifact. Breath of the Wild is, go get my brick and bring it back.
I did look this up. Apparently, Oblivion and Skyrim are pretty close to the same size. Skyrim's actually slightly smaller, but Skyrim also has a lot more content in it.
Yeah, it's a little more condensed in terms of like, kind of like Japan and Tokyo, where high density population.
Yeah, that's
Small-
something that I
smaller.
really noticed after coming
Or New
back
York.
after playing Breath of the Wild. I went back because after I played Breath of the Wild all the way through and played 100 hours of that or something, I went back to Skyrim because I got the Switch version, and it felt so small because every 5 seconds you're finding a town or something,
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
everything is so condensed, and that kind of turned me off a little bit of it from a second playthrough. And I still played for a while. I still had fun. It's still a
You
good
can't-
game. But
You can't move in Skyrim without experiencing some type of content, whether it's good content or bad. You can't move in Skyrim without encountering something,
Mhm.
which, as you said, can be to its benefit, but can also be to its detriment.
If that were applied to Breath of the Wild, this is a question to kind of myself and to you, Taylor. Would that benefit it? Do you think?
If
Would that be-
it was Skyrim,
Yeah, well, if there was to where you couldn't move without encountering content, where there was
No.
stuff everywhere. Okay,
no,
I agree. I don't think that. I think that would be too much.
there's a balance. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, because my problem coming back to Skyrim was, especially coming from Breath of the Wild. In Breath of the Wild, everything is very far apart, but that means no matter what 2 points you're going in between, you'll have an adventure on the way. Right? And in Skyrim, I found myself being like, okay, I need to go northwest to this town. There it is. I'm already there. I didn't have an adventure on the way. That was a shitty trip. That's kind of how I look at it.
It
I'm
wasn't
just like,
really a journey. It was just
yeah.
kind of.
I mean,
I'm like, I want to take the scenic route. Damn it.
I kind of had the opposite effect where, and I mean, I dropped over 2,000 hours into Skyrim and Oblivion and Morrowind before that. So like I have definitely had my share of Elder Scrolls. For like Skyrim for me, and this is, I'm talking about a base playthrough, like no mods, nothing like that adds content to it, because I've definitely done a lot of that too. But base content Skyrim, I think that my biggest issue with it was kind of like you know how we had the memes about like Ocarina of Time and stuff like that, where Ganon pulls the coup, Link's sleeping for 7 years, and then he just goes off and does random shit before helping out, stuff, or even with Breath of the Wild
Breath of
too.
the Wild, I like that.
You know, that's
Zelda's
the biggest
like,
one.
Link, wake up and help me. And Link is like fucking throwing bombs at fish naked.
Right. So I feel like there's absolutely that in Breath of the Wild, but I think Skyrim ratchets it up to 1,000,000. Like you walk 2 feet, like it's like, oh, the dragon's attacking. You need to learn the word to bring the dragon down. Fusro da this bitch. And then you're like, all right, I'm gonna go do that. 2 steps later, help! My village is burning down. Come rescue me. There's a dragon temple over there, by the way. You can learn another word. And you're like, oh, I'm gonna go do that instead.
Yeah, sometimes
like
I felt like that worked, and other times I felt like especially with the dragon attacks, that it just got tedious after a certain point, where it's just like, there's another fucking dragon? I don't want to deal with it. I have too many dragon bones in my inventory already. I am gaining nothing
there's
by
always a
fighting
dragon.
it.
There's always a dragon, and it's always burning Eddie.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's like, look, I'm not trying to offend anybody, but like you cannot play Skyrim without feeling like you have ADD. Like your attention is always divided.
ADD, so imagine how I feel playing Skyrim.
Oh man. Blessed be you.
I have ADD, but
I think
it stands for
you'd
all
still
drink,
enjoy it.
drink.
Oh, I enjoy Skyrim.
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun with Skyrim.
It's just one of those things where like you launch up the game, and no matter what your actual goal is, you're gonna end up doing 1,000 other things before you ever do your goal.
I feel like that's true in Breath of the Wild, like to even a much larger degree, because you get distracted on the way by all the stupid little shit.
But the stupid little shit doesn't hold your attention for very long. So let's say I wanted to start
shits in between that
Well,
collectively they hold your attention for much longer.
Right, but I think the biggest and this is my problem with Skyrim, or not Skyrim, sorry, with Breath of the Wild, is that like if the world was a little bit more like Skyrim, not all the way, don't become Skyrim, but like fill up the activities a little bit more, or at least with more meaningful activities and things like that, it would have been better. Whereas like, Skyrim, you're overloaded with stuff. Breath of the Wild, I felt like, okay, if I wanted to go from the ruins of the Temple of Time to go grab a sword in Hyrule Castle, yeah, I might be distracted by a Korok here or there, or a Moblin fight, or a Moblin camp, but in 20 to 30 minutes, I'm going to be where I want to be and doing what I want to do. In Skyrim, if I say I'm just going to do the main quest, I can never do it. Every single time I go through and I'm just like, I get distracted by every single little thing that comes my way because there's so much condensed into it. Like you walk 2 feet, there's a dragon wall. You walk another 2 feet, there's 6 side quests to do. You walk another 4 feet, there's a town. It's crazy.
I actually feel the opposite. I feel like Breath of the Wild had a good amount of content paced, and that side quests weren't so dense in Skyrim. It's just that it filled your screen with map markers anytime you got close to something.
That was kind of.
I'm not saying that Breath of the Wild didn't.
Yeah, because like when I got side quests, I was like, I very seldom thought I had a reason to care in Skyrim. And
I feel the same thing about Breath of the Wild
too. But
yeah.
In Breath of the Wild, I figured most of the time, at least there will be some interesting treasure at the end. And in Skyrim, sometimes I did, but there was so many side quests that I was like, which ones of them have worthwhile treasure? Which ones of them are, actually going to be worth my time to do? And
That was my
usually I
problem
would
with
take the
Breath.
ones that would,
Yeah.
take me to a ruin or something, because then at least I'd get something interesting to explore, a cool dungeon out of the deal, something like that. But if it was just some random
Well,
other thing,
I mean,
I just why do I even care?
So
aside from shrine quests, though, how many side quests ended in "Thank you so much. Here's a meal. Here's a fried chicken." In Breath of the Wild, at
That's
least.
fair, but you also didn't need the side quests as much because of all the little random stupid shit.
Yeah, but you
also-
don't need them in Skyrim either, but you still got stuff from it. So like in Breath of the Wild, I go around and in Skyrim, I can come up with reasons why I would care about a side quest and doing something, whether it's because I'm going to role play as a dragonborn who is a traveler at heart. So he wants to go chronicle all the dragon caves or the dragon priest caves. Cool. I can come up with a reason for that. Breath of the Wild, I know who I'm playing. I'm playing Link, and my job is to defeat Ganon and save the princess. And yes, technically speaking, I would be obligated to help everybody along the way that I encounter. But for one thing, I barely encounter anybody, and the quests that I encounter aren't something that are of a serious nature. Like the biggest thing you do in Breath of the Wild through a side quest is rebuild a town.
Yep.
And is that not?
And that was
better than
great.
anything
That was great.
Skyrim
Yeah.
did?
What?
Did
I
Skyrim
actually
have any quests that came close to that scale?
Of importance? Yes.
Because
Of doing the
more
exact same
important
thing?
as building
It depends. It
I
depends
mean,
on
there
which
was the Civil
elder
War
you
side
play.
quest.
I remember
felt
there
like
was a quest
most of
in the DLC or the expansion pack for Morrowind where you built a town up in Solstheim, but in Skyrim, I'm struggling to think of anything that came to anywhere near that interesting. But I also haven't spent as much time with it as you, so I might not know.
In Skyrim, there's a bunch of different things you can do. You don't exactly build a town. You can, obviously, with mods. Like, there are some mods that add in story stuff where you build up a town. But, like, in base game Skyrim, you don't quite build a town, per se. But there are definitely quite a few side quests in Skyrim that are on the scope of helping a shattered world rebuild a town to be hopefully safe in and recover from the calamity that is Ganon.
Mm-hmm.
So the Skyrim definitely, Oblivion had a ton of that kind of stuff because you were dealing with the after effects of the Daedra invading and stuff like that. And then Morrowind, you had the entire freaking elvish council fighting between everybody, and you had to play peacemaker and figure out where you fell on what side. But Breath of the Wild, again, like I said, the biggest thing you do in a side quest is rebuild a town, and that's it.
So with Skyrim, I actually kind of had the experience of there were enough side quests and enough of them had rewards at the end that it almost kind of killed my desire to explore, like, intrinsically.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was, everything has a reward attached to it. And when everything has kind of like an explicit reward attached to it, it's like you're going to the end of the dungeon to get the treasure, and it's just a linear throughput.
We're not
becomes. Yeah.
We're not saying that everything has to have a reward or everything has to have meaning to it. At least I'm specifically just saying, like, I wish it had been a little closer to Skyrim. I don't want it to be Skyrim, but
Same.
To have a little bit more meaning to a lot of the stuff that I'm doing, to have a little more worthwhile rewards would have been nice. I don't need it to be filled with it, but more than what it had would be great.
Yep. I'm there with you.
All right.
And I'm saying I disagree.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, we've been going for quite a while, so does anybody have any last-minute things to say on this topic, or shall we close out this podcast?
Breath of the Wild is a fantastic game. You should all play it. However, the story sucks. Love you.
Yep, same. It's a fantastic game. Go play it. If you haven't already.
These guys are wrong. Don't listen to them.
Breath of the Wild is
so
a
I have
fantastic
final
game.
say.
It's just not the best Zelda game. A fantastic,
I
great
don't think
open
it's the
world
best
game.
Zelda
Fantastic game.
either, but
I think the best Zelda game is Zelda 2.
Agreed.
Well, now that's
get off of my podcast.
no words.
How could you
No
say
words.
something so brave yet so controversial?
I've defended Zelda 2
Is
a
it
lot.
actually your favorite,
I
Chris?
don't know
'Cause
if I can do that.
I do know you
No,
like
no,
it, but
I am absolutely kidding.
right.
He's meme lording.
Breath of the Wild is much further up there.
Regardless, we all agree, despite our different opinions, that Breath of the Wild is absolutely a must play, especially
Yeah.
if you're a Zelda
Yep.
fan.
Yeah. And even if you're not, like, I feel like there's plenty to love anyways, even if you...
Yeah.
And this is a kind of a funny thing for me to actually be arguing anyway, because I do know that I am in the minority that really, really loves the story in this game. Most people, I feel like, are on your guys' side, where they're just like, yeah, it was bare bones, you know, this and that. You know, I didn't get the presentation or whatever. So I know I'm in the minority saying this, but I'll stand by it. I'll die on this hill as long as I get to have a beer in my hand while I'm doing it. Speaking of which, I think I forgot to rate this beer, so I'm going to give this 14 as well. So that's 3 14 score drinks. That's actually not a bad average.
Nice.
Absolutely.
I think even if you agree with Dave and I, like, there's without question some hidden gems in Breath of the Wild. So even if
There's plenty to love, and
Yeah.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
again, my wife and I have just literally just been replaying this. Like, the only thing we haven't done right now is gone to fight Ganon. That's just because we're trying to round out some shrines to get our health up, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's a fantastic game. It really is. It's deserving of almost all the accolades that it gets, if not all of them.
Mhm.
It's just, to me, it's not it has some major flaws, and that's why it can't be everything that it tried to be.
I'm 100% glad that Nintendo took this experiment to heart, created a fantastic experience all around, and I look forward to the future of Zelda.
Oh God, yes.
Despite all of its flaws, Breath of the Wild is a monumental progression in the Zelda franchise, and I cannot wait to see what Nintendo does with it.
At least it pushed the series further than Skyward Sword. Ooh, shots fired.
I don't know. Skyward Sword still has one of the better stories of all the Zelda games.
That's something I'd argue also, because I feel like it was too much just like High School Musical, the Zelda version. It's like, look at us, we have a love triangle and stuff. Like,
What do
all
you
the
expect,
characters
though?
actually progress.
Every single Zelda game,
Bruce.
Link is a teenager. What do you expect? And a child in most of them. So what did you expect?
I'll take Zac Efron playing Link over Tom Holland.
High School Musical.
You know, I say
You know
Chandler
about that
Riggs.
one.
Chandler Riggs is my vote for who to play Link in a.
I am a little sad. I've never played Skyward Sword, so I can't dunk on it properly because I lack the experience.
Right. I'll let you borrow it sometime. You still have your Wii, right? I
Yeah,
still have
somewhere.
your. I'll have to give you back your Wii Remote Plus that you left at my house like 10
Oh,
years
whoops.
ago.
Wow,
It was a long
That
ass time ago that you left that black Wii Remote.
that was quite a while ago. Yeah, I mean, I still have that black Wii.
Nice. Yeah, all right. Well, anyways, thank you for joining us on Drink to the Past. My name is Sean Michael Patrick Thompson. As always, your host, and I am joined today, as usual, by my co-host, Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris. Please go vote. Audette, go please vote.
Please.
Vote for the please candidate.
The pleasing-
please.
Yeah.
Yes.
Vote
Yes.
for no fires in Colorado. That was our big thing
and-
last year. And here Chris
yeah.
is setting fires in whatever this game was called.
That's okay. They deserved it. Those babies deserved it.
Rude.
Babies on fire. It's
You
like
can-
worse than lighting a forest on fire during a gender reveal, isn't it?
That sounds like an impressive gender reveal, I gotta
Mad
say.
at the jackasses in my state.
It's the fires are pink. I don't know how they did that, but
And we all thought Tide Pods were bad.
yeah.
Right.
You can find my writings on DriveThruRPG and itch.io under 5 Cataclysms. I wrote House of Flowers and co-wrote 5 Cataclysms Core Rules Beta Edition, which is a very nice kind of house system of like an old school that's very similar to old school D&D. My co-authors also wrote quite a few good adventures that are broadly compatible with D&D. I highly recommend all of them, particularly Mad Mask Spire. That's my favorite of the lot.
Yeah,
So check them out.
On the podcast a few times, so check both of them out. And of course, we got our 2 guests. So Dave, plug your book again.
Yeah, my story is called The Arrow Without a Hero. You can find almost all the chapters over on zeldadungeon.net. Just go to the Fanfiction Friday section or search The Arrow Without a Hero in there, and I'll bring it all up. Or you can go to my website, arrowwithoutahero.wordpress.com, and I post the chapters there as well. I'm a little behind, but I'll get to it eventually when I'm not super stupid busy. You can follow me on Twitter at DaveWayne09, or if you just care about my Zelda story and whatnot, you can follow that at Zelda Tewa, which is Zelda and then TEWAH.
All right. Check him out. And of course, our good buddy Taylor returning once again. Plug all your whatever you do. You still doing Twitch and stuff?
Yes, sir. Hi, my name is Taylor Wells. You can follow me on twitter.com/GIF_Bluehawk. Same thing for Twitch. Same link, GIF_Bluehawk. I am a freelance writer and voice actor in the video game industry, so you can also find my work in the video games you enjoy playing so much.
Nice. All right, and that brings us to the final segment of the podcast where we just talk about inane bullshit until somebody says something really hilarious and awkward and I cut off the podcast. So, what you guys been playing this week? Let's start there. We didn't do what you playing the last couple of weeks because we've had lots of guests and we actually ran over time a lot this week too. So it's probably
Korok
okay.
Punting Adventure.
If that was a spin-off, would you buy it?
Hell yes.
Yeah. Korok's tree-like rosy rupee land. Korok's tree land. Yes.
Korok's in Breath of the Wild only reinforced my hatred for Wind Waker.
Is that your sole reason for hating such a great, fantastic game?
I mean, at this point, since I still haven't played Wind Waker HD, maybe. But
I mean,
oh man,
you've never really like justified your hatred here, which obviously is like a rational thing that you have to do to everybody, or else you can't hate something anymore. So
I mean, I can hate it based off of the fact that it did literally nothing original.
I mean,
in Zelda, same thing with Breath of the Wild.
I think it added a
Pirate
combat
Nah.
system a little bit. From Ocarina of Time, giving you the parries and things like that, which eventually I feel like sprang into and grew naturally into the various different weapons and different techniques that you can use in Breath of the Wild, like the Flurry Rush and all that. So,
I mean, I could also say that Link to the Past and Minish Cap kind of did the same thing.
I also
just to a not as advanced degree, obviously.
Minish Cap, I would definitely agree with. Was Minish Cap?
Although Minish Cap came after.
Yeah, Minish Cap was after. Yeah, so because
Minish Cap was the game released after
like
Wind Waker.
how it kind of progressed was like you got your base 3D combat in Ocarina of Time. Majora's Mask pretty much just did the same thing because they didn't have enough time to do shit different, and Wind Waker sort of started to build off it a little bit, and then it went kind of to the 2D side with all the weapon scrolls where you could get different sword techniques, and that was pretty cool. And then they really started going at it in Twilight Princess. So if you look at them game by game, I feel like there's a natural progression for the combat that eventually led to how really awesome it is in Breath of the Wild with your different techniques that you can use. You're throwing weapons, you're, using different styles of weapons and stuff like that.
Getting bullet time.
And I feel like Wind Waker was a very important step in there because it's the first time that swordplay was more than just tapping B.
Well, I mean, if you want an even more empty game than Breath of the Wild, play Wind Waker. That's another gripe I have.
It's so fair that it makes me angry.
Yeah.
I mean,
I will not deny
I liked
this.
all the islands, though.
Look, all I'm gonna say,
I feel like had something interesting. The sea, I'll give you, was kind of empty and boring. But I mean, once you got to an island, that was where the real content was. It's like you just had a slightly long loading screen while you're driving there, right?
All I'm gonna say is that Wind Waker, to its detriment, absolutely nailed sea travel. Like they did it so well, it was bad.
minus
true.
getting
That's
like
what sea travel is like.
I'm also
getting seasickness and diseases from sea travel. Yeah.
I'm also of the opinion that
because I drank my rum.
that originality is overrated.
I agree. I think as long as you like, and this is something that Breath of the Wild does well, and I think most Zelda games do well. And again, I will caveat this by saying that while Wind Waker is my least favorite Zelda game, it is by far still a fantastic game to play.
Of all the Zelda games that are out there, it's certainly one of them.
Yes, exactly.
That's kind of how I feel about Skyward Sword. Is it's my least favorite non-Zelda 2 Zelda, and it's still a good game. It's fun.
I definitely am one of those people who thinks that there isn't a bad Zelda game. Like all the Zelda games are good. I genuinely think that all Zelda games in their own way are good games. Are they games that would make your top 5 of all time? Maybe not, but they're all solid games. Even Zelda 2.
Zelda 2 is Triforce Heroes.
I love Triforce Heroes. It's one of my favorite.
Triforce Heroes.
It's an amazing.
I never played Triforce Heroes.
Yeah, I'm in that camp. It just didn't click with me. It didn't appeal to me. The only 3DS Zelda game that I've played is A Link Between Worlds so far. I have not played Spirit Tracks or Phantom Hourglass either, but that's it for the Zelda series of ones that I've missed.
Both of those, even though they're kind of on the more kind of flip-floppy side. A lot of people really don't like them because of the touchscreen controls and stuff like that. But I thought it was a different thing to do, and I don't think it was bad because it was a different thing to do. But I kind of get why people wouldn't like it, because it's not really a traditional Zelda game. But I think that's okay. For what it was, I think it did everything it did really well.
I think Phantom Hourglass had some of the most original and best uses of items in the Zelda series.
And Spirit Tracks, I would give a shout out as in probably my top 3 favorite Zelda soundtracks.
Spirit Tracks?
Yeah.
I could see that.
Spirit Tracks' music is fucking great.
They did have some pretty clapping tunes.
Mm-hmm. As much as I hated traveling the overworld in the train, I really didn't mind as much because the overworld theme was just so badass.
Have you ever heard oh crap, I used to have it on my computer, but there was a remix that somebody did where they combined, I think it was the Song of Storms and the Spirit Tracks theme, and it was phenomenal. I was like, man, this is the mashup that I don't deserve, but I definitely needed.
Nice.
I need to hear that. Song of Storms is my favorite.
If you find that, then, yeah.
Spirit Tracks is definitely one of those games where I stopped playing after I had to blow into a flute. I was so frustrated by that mechanic that
I thought some of those gimmicks were hilarious. I really like the puzzle. A lot of people criticize the puzzle where it's like it gives you a backwards map on the top screen and you have your like regular map on the bottom screen, and you have to like stamp them together, so you literally have to close the system to stamp them and solve the puzzle. I thought that was hilarious and amazing, and most people fucking hate that puzzle.
Can we talk about how Majora's Mask 3D is the greatest remake in video game history?
I be curious to see why you liked that one better as the. Did you like that one better as the remake, or are you just saying that it's the best remake?
Well, okay, so for one thing, I'm not 100% serious on that. I think it is the best remake done in Zelda so far, and I think it is a great remake overall. Like, I think Final Fantasy VII Remake is the best remake of all time so far, but Majora's Mask, like, I don't understand the hatred that so many people have for it, because it literally did the same thing that Ocarina of Time 3D did, except it simplified a lot of the issues that people had with the OG Majora's Mask. I think that people who struggled playing the original Majora's Mask actually would find Majora's Mask 3D more enjoyable and easier to handle.
I do agree to an extent, because I played the original Majora. Well, I played the GameCube Majora's Mask, so it's the original, but it's not the original. Anyways, I played it on
It also
GameCube.
looks fantastic.
Yeah, I really did like most of the changes that they did, but I felt like some of the changes that they did were random and superfluous. Especially to the bosses, just adding the giant eyeballs, I felt like was a very big turnoff. It seemed to have no purpose, and it made all of the boss fights feel less interesting. I really liked the Adalwa fight in the original, for example, and when it's just turned into a weird eyeball, and it totally changed the mechanics of the fight, and I thought it was just kind of pointless.
So I wouldn't say it's pointless, like the changes, like especially with the boss mechanics. So one, there's story reason for it. It's to make it more obvious that they're under Majora's control. The second reason it's not pointless is because the reason they changed the boss mechanics for all the fights, like the only fight that plays the exact same way is the goat fight, because they didn't have to change very much.
Right.
And the reason that they did that is to actually make it so it is necessary to use the masks for those fights, because in the OG Majora's Mask, in a lot of those fights, you didn't have to use the transformation mask at all to win the fight.
I kind of get that, but I also really
It's
like
just
fighting
unnecessary revisionism.
Yeah, that's kind of how I.
That's fair.
Yeah, because like in the Adalwa fight, what I liked about that was fighting this giant warrior with my bow and arrow. I thought that was really awesome, and I was so confused when I was playing Majora's Mask 3D. I'm all shooting him with the bow and arrow over. It's not doing anything.
It's not working.
Because it literally just doesn't damage him. And I thought, what am I doing wrong? I'm doing exactly the same thing I used to do when I was playing this game. Why can't I beat him? And then I figured out, oh, wait, hold on. There's these flowers around, and I didn't even realize the flowers were there in the original, and you can, shoot up and drop the Deku Nut on him and stun him in that. And I was like, why is this eyeball here? I kind of get what you're saying, and I kind of respect it a little more because you've said what you've said, but at the same time, I feel like it's a change that didn't need to happen.
I have zero respect
it wasn't
for this
necessary.
change.
It wasn't necessary. It's one I understand from working in video games and understanding, like, the concepts behind things. And Majora's Mask in the original, like the one of the biggest features of it was the transformation masks and all the rest of the masks that you literally use to do everything in the game. In addition to the dungeon item that you find in those dungeons. So I understand why they're like, well, we want to kind of highlight that, and we want to make it more obvious that, this is what you were supposed to do in those fights. Because literally everything you do in the remake to beat those bosses, the exception of the last two with George and Twin Mold. You can beat those bosses in the original Majora's Mask the exact same way that you beat them in the remake. In the remake, though, you cannot always beat them the same way that you did in the OG.
Right, but is it better that way to take away options from a player?
I'm not saying that it was better. Like I said, I understand the reason why they did it. Do I think that it was a necessary change? Absolutely not. Do I mind the change? No, because I still really love the game, and I actually do enjoy the transformation masks and things like that. And it was a different way to play it, so it was a new experience for me to handle those fights differently than I originally did.
knowing about that change makes me less likely to pick up that remake.
Same.
Well, on the other hand, too, though, think about it this way. If that's the only change that bothers you, why is that game ruining?
Why is that what?
Why is that game ruining? That's because I tell
don't think
you
it's
the one
game ruining.
It's
but-
not game ruining. It's I already have the original Majora's Mask. I would like a graphical update, because the graphical update's nice. I think it added like a quality of life improvement. The owl statues. I'm not a huge fan of them.
It also gives you the
of how
demo,
they
too.
of how they work in the new game or in the remake,
But, they
but
work so
I
much
don't.
better.
I
Yeah,
can
they're
say that they're a
lot
definite
better.
improvement. I think this
So-
change is an active
So
detriment
most
to the original design.
most people I've talked to, their only complaint about Majora's Mask that they can provide any like solid reasoning as to why it sucks is the boss changes. Like that's the only one, and I think that to completely disregard the game, like Majora's Mask, as a remake and enjoy all the quality of life changes and all the updated stuff based off of the fact that the bosses are different is like saying I refuse to play Wind Waker because it has a shitty graphic style. It doesn't justify, I don't think, not picking it up and playing it. I'm not saying you necessarily should buy it. Like if it's a money thing, I totally get it. But
I'm not trying to justify it. I'm saying this is how I feel about this, and I feel very strongly about it.
Yeah, I'd look at it as I have the original. I love the original as it is. Why do I? Again, yeah, the graphical update would be nice, but at the same time, as long as I have the original and it works just fine, why fix what isn't broke?
Yeah.
I don't have any problems with the original beyond just things that aren't going to change or things that aren't changing in the update or in the remake. So therefore, why
same
invest my time and care with the remake?
Same logic applies to Ocarina of Time 3D. Why play Ocarina of Time 3D if you have the OG? And my reasoning is because I like the updated graphics. I like playing the game all over again and in a somewhat new style while still being able to remember everything that I loved about the game. And I will agree.
Time 3D, I feel, is kind of an apples to oranges comparison. I died again.
Oh,
Man, that was a pretty
bad.
brutal death.
We're
that
best
was bad.
I feel like it's an apples to oranges comparison in some ways, and I know we've even had people talked with who have disagreed about this, but the design decisions that they did change in Ocarina of Time 3D are significantly less central to how the game plays.
I mean, you could argue the same thing for Majora's Mask apart from the boss fights. There's nothing that Majora's Mask changes that like overall makes or breaks the game.
And the owl statues.
The owl statues didn't make or break it because I can save just as easily in the OG Majora's Mask as I can in Majora's Mask Remake. It's just not as convenient. And I'm fine with that. Like,
yeah, I don't.
Because when I play through Majora's Mask OG, like I'm doing everything in a cycle that I need to or want to do. So then when I'm going to save is going to be, playing the Song of Time and going back. So that doesn't bother me. Yes, it's a lot more convenient in Majora's Mask Remake, and I think that is one of the best changes in the game. Do I think it breaks or makes the game? No, because yes, it allows you with the portability of the DS, which is really why that change was made as well, because they expected people to be playing on the go and not be able to just play the Song of Time to save your game, because if you don't, you lose all your progress. There are fundamental reasons for every change that they did in Ocarina of Time 3D and Majora's Mask that don't necessarily apply to the overall thinking of OG design. They have to think about things like how are modern games played?
Sure.
How are what platform are we marketing this game towards? You know, if they made it on the Wii U, if they made Majora's Mask remake on the Wii U, they would have zero reason to change the save mechanic other than just convenience and being like, hey, yeah, it'd be neat to be able to save at any time as opposed to, you know, playing the Song of Time and restarting my progress.
Yeah.
And I think there's a much stronger argument to be made that that's merely a quality of life update. I personally don't like it, but I'm like, that's not the turn off in the same way that the boss fight changes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, so let's deep dive into the boss changes. So,
I mean,
is it just the fact that each boss has a giant red eye, or is it the fact that you are ticked that you just can't play it the same way?
I'm ticked that they decided to narrow the design of how you're supposed to beat the boss to the intended experience in a game that is almost old enough to drink.
Yeah, but most games do that. Most games, in some way, shape, or form, will always try and narrow your experience to the intended play style.
Not Noida, which is the game I'm playing right now.
I didn't say every game. I said most games.
And
I was like,
here's
Breath
a kind
of the
of
Wild.
a point. That I was actually going to go with Breath of the Wild as well as an example of this. Is my very favorite thing about the game is that there is no incorrect way to play it. And I feel like if there is an incorrect way to play something, then it just boils down to bad game design.
But I don't
So-
feel the changes to the boss fights make any way incorrect to fight the bosses, because literally in every Zelda game there is intended ways to beat the bosses.
Right, but
Like for even in Breath of the Wild, like with the four Ganons, you are meant to beat them in specific ways. Yes, you can beat them in other ways or using unconventional thinking to take them
Same.
down. But
Yeah,
they are
same
intended to
fine.
be beat in a certain way.
with the bosses in Majora's Mask, I feel like it's another case of it's not broke. Why did you try to fix it? Like,
That's-
it's
my
just narrowing, and
It
I don't
doesn't
feel like
add,
there's anything gained out of that. Yeah.
and it's not a positive subtraction. It's just saying, no, you weren't beating the bosses the way we wanted you to the first time. It's the shittiest form of game design.
Strong words.
Yeah, and again, my stance is I just don't see anything wrong with the original, at least the way that it was designed to that aspect. So therefore, why change it? Why narrow it? Why make it a harder to? Why limit the player? Why put that limit on them when you could just let them beat it any various way? If they want to do it the way that they were intended to, let them beat it that way. But then if they found out another way to do it, like in Breath of the Wild, flip the Wii U pad over, the game controller over, and let that ball fall on the flat backside and let it roll into the spot where it's supposed to.
As long as there isn't a good design reason, like, say, an optimization that makes the game more boring, to change the design of something, if there's an alternate path to success, you should just let it stay in the game, because it usually adds something to it. It makes the players feel like they discovered something.
And as long as it doesn't completely break the game.
Yeah.
I mean,
And that's the other thing is from that side, we don't necessarily know if there was a fundamental game reason, like a game design reason why it was changed.
Sure.
Like maybe they couldn't port the way the boss worked from the original game to the 3DS. I don't think that's the case, but you know, it could be anything. I just know that the stated reason that they've always said and that they've always stood by for the remake and why they made those changes was because they had originally, like, the transformation masks are supposed to be the highlight of Majora's Masks in the first place, and the bosses were always intended to require the use of them in some way. Like, you didn't necessarily have to use them all the time, but you needed to absolutely use them.
But that's anti-follow. So if I was taking this as like a brand new game, I would say, even then, I would say this is an anti-follow the fun kind of design.
I mean, that's fair, but I mean, like, you know, at the same time, I don't think it's something that like ruins the game for me. Is it something they needed to do? Was it a smart decision to do? Was it the right choice? Maybe not, probably not.
I'm not arguing that it should ruin the game for you. I'm saying why, to me personally, this makes it significantly less appealing, because it's a philosophy that's directly at odds with how I want games designed.
Yeah, fair enough.
I never thought that I would have a Breath of the Wild special on this podcast that we talked so much about Majora's Mask.
Also,
Breath of the Wild
PP
leads into all
on
things.
fire, so, you know.
That's the fun of this podcast, though, is like, you know, a lot of podcasts, they're all trying to steer back to their main topic, and I'm just like, fuck it, let the conversation happen.
Oh yeah.
It's more fun that
Oh, I'm gonna get way too angry and intense over something that's relatively minor.
Uh-oh. Drop the nuke.
We're also not saying anything awkward, which is like, I'm fine. I guess I'm fine just like talking in depth.
Sean,
Awkward in
did you
itself.
not hear me say my PP on fire?
I don't know. Is that awkward enough to cut off the podcast?
Probably not. I don't know. Let's keep it going.
We've had
How
Are
much-
you asking for help to put it out? Is that what why you're bringing it up, or?
Much fire on your
I don't
PP
know. I'm
is
just a little
equivalent to
proud of
having Big PP energy.
I have good PP energy. It's fire damage.
Does PP stand for power points, or
It's no.
it's not like Pokemon PP?
I don't
It's
think
not
I
like
can say it on the cast.
It's my weenus.
Oh, your elbow skin? Okay.
Oh, is that what that is? Yeah,
Yeah.
but you know, that's one of those words I didn't know beforehand.
You know, if
Now,
you look up on dictionary.com, they also have the word vagina on there.
It's the foreskin of your elbow. The weenus. I don't know about the vagina.
The weenus is on this end of the elbow, and the vagina is on the inside.
Oh, nice.
The vagina is on the
So
inside.
it's a
So now that-
colloquial
right?
term.
So that begs the question, which is your favorite? Are you a vagina man or a weenus man?
I like just kind of rubbing them together.
Oh yeah, there you go.
You're missing out if you're listening to
I
this
rub
on
weenuses
Podbean.
with
Check
my
us
wife
out on
every once in a
YouTube.
while.
Hmm.
When I want to weird my wife out, I'll rub my weenus against hers.
You ever get rug burn on your weenus?
I feel like maybe as a kid I did. I don't specifically remember it, but I feel like
As a kid,
I can imagine rug burn happening there.
My question is why
have a
you're
lot
more
of
likely to
rug
have rug
burn.
burn as a kid on your weenus and less likely to have it as an adult.
I got rug burn a lot more as a kid because I was like running all over the place and you know, like doing shit instead of drinking beer and playing video games and talking about video games and drinking beer.
I don't know, man. I tripped the same way I did as a kid as an adult. So
Chris, in this game, are you like throwing a bucket of water or are you just like pissing on everything? I literally can't tell because it's like
it
pixel
does look
art.
like I'm pissing, but if you take a look at this,
You're
just
peeing
let the
lava.
man. Oh,
Dear
there's
God, what did you
liquid
cut
fire.
off?
I wish I could pee lava. That would be a great superpower. I am writing a comic book about a guy who pees lava.